Hello, folks. Welcome. Yeah, it's me. It's the plant my members named. And if you are completely new here, maybe a little No, I won't apologize for my members because they paid for this. So say hello to Hugo, or his full name, Hugo the Ass Burner. It's a chili plant, and yeah. So that's that. Today's topic is strong DNA evidence versus weak DNA evidence, and it will be amazing. I hope. Let's see who's. Hello, Gigi. Always here. Thank you. Thank you. Uni B. Jones. Good to see you again. And Sadie and Fedorevsky. And I saw apostate Amanda, who forgot she had the speakers on high. Yeah, that might have been interesting with that intro. Niklas, and hello, Hugo. Yeah, Hugo says hi back. Neo Dark Matter, Lynn Dalton back again. Yo, Paulo, not guilty. Yeah. It's good to see you all. Let's not wait any longer. They are starting to assemble. 30 people here now. I hope you will be more, because this is an important discussion, I believe, in which we all can come back better informed. And with that, I would like you to say hello to today's guest, my friend, Steve Gosney.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, most welcome, most welcome. The one I really thought about when I was planning this stream was, okay, who do I know?
And, who do you know?
Yeah, who do I know? And then
I think I've been burning up my welcome. I was thinking that I was going to have my life was going to be crushed with a case that I've got coming in, but I have a 1 month reprieve. So, but what I was doing is I was trying to crush in all of these appearances on all these different channels over time. And so it's funny because I've been talking about way different stuff, and different channels. So this is another one to spread my wings a little bit and talk about something that's not, the same old stuff repeating over and over on different channels, right? I mean, so I appreciate it's a neat topic that you've got here today. Is that Danielle? Is that my Danielle?
I think that's your Danielle. Yeah.
Okay. I got confused because I think on one other stream I was on, I was calling out Danielle, and they're like, no, that's a different Danielle. I'm like, oh,
okay. Let's see. Steve Gosney, also known as Ricada. No, that Steve and Nick are two different people, but Steve is a frequent guest, I guess, on Nick's stream.
Sometimes, I don't know. That's a good question. Am I frequent? What qualifies as frequent? I guess it depends on definitions.
Well, today's topic is DNA evidence, and we have had, in my opinion, a few interesting cases just the last month where at least the presentation, in my view, has been vastly different. And so that would be the topic. I have chosen 2 trials, of which we will be checking in on one forensic serologist in the Letitia Stout trial, and then an employee of the Wisconsin State Lab, Lisa Treffinger. Are we having an echo?
Are we? It might be me. If you want, I can put on headphones, but
yeah, we'll let the chat decide if it's just me. I don't mind.
But if we're going to do a couple of cases, we might want to do some frameworking, because it's quite a complex subject, and so we might want to do some framing before we do the audio, so that way people go into it with a little more base of knowledge.
Yeah, the scene is yours. As I said to you before we started, in labor law, I rarely come across a case that involves DNA. Most often, you know who drove the forklift. So, apostate Amanda says she minds if there is an echo.
But that's an LOL. Is there an
Sounds
echo? Or
good, yeah.
she says it sounds good. I know I can't hear an echo. Fedor. Hey, Fedor. Fedor is a frequent
Yeah.
follow. I see Fedor all over.
No, I think the echo disappeared.
Okay. Well,
Maybe
and so I'll just kind of talk a little bit about DNA in the context of criminal law. I would say it's revolutionized criminal law, this science. And there's a lot of great parts of that, and there's some not so great parts of that. The first is that that it is a very powerful, and it's probably the gold standard of scientific evidence. And you'll see experts coming up, and when there's an identity question, and say that the alibi is I wasn't there, and I have no reason to be there, and I've never been there. I've had so many cases where the DNA puts the person there. Now, there's a lot of it's tough to explain around things sometimes. So, but DNA, you can say, like, I remember there was one case, this is a long time ago. It wasn't my case. It was somebody else's case. And it was a murder, and it was a violent pummeling murder with fists. And the person was in a fist fight, or was in some sort of, violent fight where the person resisted. And eventually the loser was killed and was on their back, and their glasses on. So their head was paced up and their glasses were on. And the theory was that the murderer stood over the victim, panting after they're done, right? And the key DNA evidence was there was a droplet of sweat on the front of the glasses of the murder victim that DNA'd to the perpetrator. So a droplet of sweat on the front of the glasses containing your DNA is pretty hard to explain away. That is consistent. I mean, that is such powerful evidence of the identity of the killer that it's just killer. That's just killer evidence now. And I hear that in the Idaho murder case, the quadruple homicide that was done in Idaho that Megan Fox is covering. And I've been kind of following it a little bit. It's the whole K-bar. Everybody laughs about my K-bar because I was really excited about, because we're trying to figure out what the evidence is against this particular killer. And the evidence was that there was DNA. There was and I'll show you, there was a sheath, and this isn't the K-bar exactly, but there's a K-bar knife, and there was a sheath, which is the knife in the sheath. The sheath was left behind at the murder scene. And they say in an affidavit that there is DNA on the snap of the sheath of the killer, of the person that they arrested. So the question that the defendant's going to have to answer is, how did his sheath with his DNA on the snap end up next to the murder victims? So that is such killer, powerful evidence when you can say, I was never there. Well, how did that happen? Now the problem is that people put such weight into DNA that it sometimes it's not the issue. So, for example, if you have a family member in the home, and their family member's DNA is going to be all over their home. So finding DNA of a family member at a place that you're regular, it doesn't make a difference. Another one is like, your DNA was on ammunition. Well, what if you go and you handle ammunition in a gun store? Your DNA is transferred, and now your DNA is on a shell casing that's later recovered at a murder scene, and you're eyeballed as the person. You're like, well, I was just handling that thing in the gun store, right? Or whatever, the knife. So there can be it's a little tricky there, right? So I mean, that's kind of the first threshold, is what exactly is the DNA telling you? Just because there's DNA there, you've got DNA on a door handle. Well, maybe you were there before and you used the door handle. Doesn't mean you did it. It just means that you were present, or there was some presence there, right? And that it may be very powerful, or it may not be. It depends on the context, where it's located, and this sort of thing.
Yeah, and if go on the conspiracy a bit more on the conspiracy, have he handed the knife over to someone, and that's why the DNA was transferred there? But then we are a bit out of on the conspiracy.
Right. So
But
you
it
need
has happened.
more.
It has happened.
You need more than just the evidence of DNA. It depends where it's found, where it's located, and you have to very carefully handle it. And that's why they put those little placards, and they photograph, and they're very careful. And a good investigating officer will come upon a crime scene and say, okay, I want where is there likely to be DNA, and locate the different locations of the DNA. Like I had a case with a murder victim, and there was saliva on the naked body of the victim, the murder victim, and the saliva came back from the person who said I was never there, right? So that's killer evidence, right? So but then again, if it's just random, I mean, you're leaving DNA all over the place. So that's the first thing. The other is that it's also been a powerful tool for exculpating people, or the Innocence Project has been very aggressive and testing old DNA and finding that people that were put in prison on death row and life in prison actually didn't do it. And then they actually identify the real killer in some of these cases. There was a case, Chris Fabricant's book, Junk Science, which I like to refer to, talks about bite mark evidence. And somebody was convicted on the faux science of bite mark evidence. And he was spent 35 years, I think over 35 years in prison for killing and raping, killing the husband and raping the wife. And then there was a bite on her thigh, I think it was. And they convicted him on this bite mark evidence and some circumstantial stuff. He spent most of his life in prison, and it turns out he didn't do it. The DNA, they later then tested some DNA and found out it was another first person who had an extensive record, and he was exonerated. Now, and so it's like, well, that's great. So DNA solves all this problem. Now we know beyond a reasonable doubt that when they're guilty and when they're not. But see, the error there is that there's not DNA in a lot of cases. A lot of cases are convictions without DNA. So those people, I have several of them. I mean, I know several of them where I believe that some of my clients are actually innocent, but there's no DNA, so there's no key to the prison. There's no way to test anything because they were convicted on eyewitness testimony or other circumstances that can also be flawed. There's no perfection, but the fact is like, just because people are exonerated off the death row or whatever, there's also a subset of people that don't have that ability to exonerate them. So it's a great tool, but it has to be very carefully thought about and put in context.
Yeah, it has to be collaborating evidence to not just the DNA. Oh, there's DNA there. Okay, but why is it there? Is it transfer? Where did it originate from? Stuff like that. Stuff that you have to find out. In my opinion, it's not only you have to what do you call it? Just finding DNA is not an answer in itself. Has it been there for a long time? Has it been degenerated? I do believe they nowadays can see. I should have brought that one up too. That was a Swedish report about how you can see that DNA have degenerated over time, so to speak. It was a case about where they found a body a few months later. They found a person's DNA there. That person claimed, I found the body, it wasn't me who did it. So in that case, they could see if it was fresh or degenerated DNA.
And people, and the thing, another problem with DNA, I would say, is that there's something called the what is it? The CSI effect. That juries think that all science is perfect and bulletproof, and also that other sciences, supposed sciences, there's a lot of faux sciences out there that puts their nose under the tent because we're going to solve everything from science, when in fact it really takes good police work, and that's hard. It's hard police work. It has to be methodical. It has to be thoughtful. And it's one tool. It's not going to solve everything. I think it can create laziness on the part of good on police rather than good. What's he says? Check out Stephen for all things law, life, and music. Isn't that nice? Well, mostly like YouTube and mostly on Rumble, right? Yeah, that's funny. Thank you, Chi-Chi. That's nice. So that there's that effect. And then, of course, let me see. What was something else I wanted to cover on DNA before we got started? Let me think about it for a second here. I don't know. So, any questions? Any chats? Super chats? Or what do you do? Do you have super chats or?
I do have super chats, but my members and people often know that they should donate to the Zachariah Anderson Defense Fund instead of sending me.
Yeah, and there's I know that the science of DNA has gotten a lot better too. So they're able to extract DNA from smaller and smaller samples. This has been used not only in the criminal law, but in body identification. So they'll find just a piece of a person and they can identify who that person was, or at least get a DNA genetic profile. There are crimes that are solved by DNA profile linked into these ancestry databases.
Yeah.
So it's like, in fact, I believe that's how they find the Idaho killer, because the DNA of his parents, they were in an ancestry type database, which raises a lot of questions too. But that they could say this person is related to these people that we have in the database, which is fascinating.
Yeah. I believe the Idaho case was they collected the garbage from. They already had an idea who it was. They collected the garbage. They found the father's DNA or someone's DNA. Checked it on one of these ancestry sites. Turns back, oh, it is the father, and then that in that case could be linked back to a partial DNA, well, the part that matched the dad's DNA on that knife sheath. Okay, thank you so much, MLS. $20. What are Steve's thought on the Mark Carver case?
Well, that is a good question. I am not familiar with the Mark Carver case, but I'm looking it up. It looks like he's on the National Registry of Exonerations. So let me just say that the National Registry of Exonerations is off the University of Michigan Law School. They have 3,307 exonerations since 1989, 3,300 plus exonerations since 1989. And that is, and of the total number of years in prison that people have lost, 29,100 years in prison that have been lost to false convictions. And so he's on the national database. So there's a lot of reasons. I really, people know me as being a strong critic or a vocal person when I see prosecutorial misconduct, because I'm familiar with the National Registry of Exonerations, and I feel very strongly that every prosecutor needs to be thoroughly versed in the National Registry of Exonerations and why people are falsely convicted. And because if they are not, then they tend to buy into like eyewitness testimony, false confessions. There are reasons that people do falsely confess. And it's amazing but it's a very important thing. And same thing with people falsely confess, and eyewitnesses can be vastly wrong. Memory creation is a thing. So a little skepticism on the part of prosecutors is really important. And by studying these cases of actual exonerations, you can see it's like, why were they falsely convicted? It's a helpful thing. And I think every prosecutor has a duty to study that.
Yeah, I agree. Something I can never come to terms with is, why do you elect prosecutors? That should never be a popularity contest.
Very good question.
But that might be for another discussion.
Right. Well, the topic for today is DNA, Mr. Dick.
Yeah, but I have to say, with the Lori Wallow case, I heard that they even in that county they elect the coroner.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of strange elections. We elect everything around here, And it's funny because we always accuse Sweden of being like this socialist country that loves government. But boy, for Americans who say they don't like government, we like government up and down. We have cities, we have counties, we have state, we have federal, we have mosquito control districts, and we have sheriff's departments and police departments and constables and everything in between. It's like we have so much government in so many different levels, and it's like, but we like limited government. Really? Not by judge. Not when I look around. It's the government's all over the place here. So I think there's a little bit of benefit of being Swedish and having sort of a unified, coherent group of people.
We have our specialty courts, and then we have the lower court, the appellate court, and the Supreme Court. So we have a specialty court for labor issues and labor law. We have a specialty court for copyright. We have a specialty court for migration issues. But that and a few maybe 2 or 3 more that I can't remember right now. But other than that, boom, 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 done. And then of course everybody can appeal to the EU court. That's the absolute top. But
and I'll tell you a little bit more about, from a practitioner standpoint, how we handle DNA, because and you'd asked me on, and I tried to get somebody on that was more of a specialist on DNA. I have a general knowledge. I've crossed on it. I understand it, but I'm not, by no means am I the guy that does DNA. So what we do is, if there's a question, and so a lot of this is like, so you got a case, you got DNA. And then, thank you, Composer C. You're awesome too. Thanks for watching. But what happens is you get a case comes in, and then you talk with your client, and your client tells you the defense, basically. I mean, the client says, well, I wasn't there, and it wasn't me. Okay, but then there's DNA. And then you come back to him and say, well, then how did your DNA get here? And there's either an explanation or there's not. And let's assume that he comes up with something that's like, well, no, that's not true, or there must be a problem, that can't be. Then what we would do is we might hire our own DNA expert, and we get our own analysis to independently test the sample, or to at least look at the reports, or whatever would be required, right? If then our DNA experts, let's assume they come back and they have a different conclusion, right? Then what we would do is we would tap a specialist defense attorney within our office who is the best at DNA cross-examination, and then have them second chair the case. And when the DNA expert comes on, they take that expert on using our expert report, and they handle the DNA portion of the case. So typically that's the way these things are done. If I'm, when I'm doing a trial, or anybody in our trial division does that, you have to be skeptical of everything, and and look for, and when there's an issue and it's like, hey, there's a DNA issue, that's when you associate somebody who's an expert on. Now, I will also say that as part of the plea colloquy in the cases, so most of our, a lot of our cases plea are not trials. And then when they plea, they go through a whole dialogue with the defendant. One of the questions to the prosecutor's office is whether there is DNA evidence in the case, which is interesting because of the impact of the exonerations and the Innocence Project. Because of so many people have been exonerated out of prison, they now have to put on the record during the plea whether or not there was DNA or not. So that way, when they come back and look at it in a secondary state, there will be, that information will be there for future action, so to speak.
Okay, I've starred this.
Yes, and we do get experts. Somebody says, any luck? Yes, we have a budget for experts. And so we get about 75% of the budget of the prosecutors, but the prosecutors deal with private attorneys too, so they have a larger budget. And of course, we're in Florida, at least. I think we're generally, at least in my jurisdiction, it's pretty fairly divided. Of course, I think we should be paid more, or at least equivalent, but we get what we want when we need it. We're not going to have an independent DNA expert on every case. We're only going to pick the cases in which the client, or there is some avenue, or like sometimes the client says, I didn't do it, but it doesn't matter. The DNA doesn't matter, right? It's only when it really matters, or in a death penalty case, in which case we challenge everything. And that's one of the reasons it's expensive to do, because you have to hire, you have to challenge every bit of evidence, you have to do everything to the T, maximum due process. So that's not really a problem. I will say, though, in the recent death penalty legislation that they're ramping up, I will note that there is no budgeted money line item for the increased burden on the defense for this new aggressive Florida death penalty thing we have, which I think is a major problem, because it's going to greatly increase the costs of our office. And they did not budget that. So I think there's a problem, major problem, with what the legislature is doing. But that's a Florida specific thing.
Okay, and before we go into the first, please consider being a member of my channel. That revenue, that it's $3 a month. I like to keep it on a lower end of the budget, because I prefer more members than more money, and that membership has rendered in. I have now StreamYard Plus, or StreamYard Pro, Canva Pro, and internet that is dedicated to my channel. So thank you so much, members, for allowing me to continue doing this, and eventually getting better equipment along the way. But let's go first into watch a trial and the testimony from the Letitia Stauch trial from the forensic serologist, which I had no idea was a separate name.
Yes, so serology is basically, what they'll do is they'll take a swab from the inside cheek, and so the cheek cells are very rich in DNA, whereas red blood cells in hair, from my understanding, is and also sex cells, sperm, and are less production. But of course, like I said, the DNA has been gotten so much better that I'm always amazed by what they can pull off, these DNA experts. It's really quite a science, but and it's like the gold standard of science.
We will start at this is from the Law and C Word stream, so that is why I'm covering up their logo with my tractor. And this clip will be around 40 minutes.
Can you up the speed?
Yeah, sure. Let's get it up to, let's start with 1.5, and we can start and stop here if we find something worth discussing.
Thank you. May all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358, People versus Letitia. Pursuit reflective jury has returned to the courtroom. Prosecution, call your next witness.
Yeah, people call Sherry Holes to the stand.
Right. Ms. Holes, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, ma'am. You swear affirm the testimony about to give in this man will be the truth, the whole truth.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and last name?
Yes, my name is Sherry Holes. It's Sherrie, last of Holes, Holes.
And what is your occupation?
I'm currently employed as a forensic serologist and DNA analyst at the Colorado Springs Metro Crime Lab.
And how long have you been employed such as?
I've been employed in that role approximately 4.5 years at the CSPD Crime Lab.
And what does a forensic serologist
Stop
do?
you for just a moment.
Oh, sure.
Can you
And if
move
you
that
ever
so
need
that it's
to
on
take
its
a
side so it doesn't block
bathroom
the
break
view of
in a
those two jurors
trial,
right there?
The beginning of the expert testimony is when you want to do it, because all they do is they talk about all their qualifications and their training and everything else. It has nothing to do with really the evidence that's being presented. It's an appeal to credibility, and the prosecutors love to talk, and they're trained to do this. So usually this predicate stuff is, and then what's, so here's the structure of a direct exam for a prosecutor. They introduce the witness. You're an expert. You're employed by the state. Here's all my credentials. Here's all the training I do. Here's what DNA is. And there's a general explanation of it. And then they're going to get into, are you involved in this case? Yes. Then they're going to say, did you collect? Then they're going to probably introduce like swabs. Here, this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence. It may have been already in evidence because cops collected it, right? But they're going to familiarize them with the different samples. So yes, I examined this swab, and yes, I examined this swab. And then the only thing that matters in all of that is, did these match or did they not? So the end of this testimony is the thing that matters evidentiary-wise, but it's kind of tedious, this introduction stuff. So if you're ever in a trial and you hear this expert come on, take the bathroom break now.
Yeah, but because they are not there without a reason, without the background, but they have to enter it into the system. Yeah.
Yeah, and the jury is generally not as educated as our chat or as and so they're seeking to educate them in this whole process of DNA and who is this person, how do they fit the case. So that's why they have to do it, but a lot of it is predicate sort of questions that aren't as it's the same stuff over and over again,
Yeah. And thank you, Uni B. Jones, for gifting 5 memberships. The receiver was Tweety US News, Jim Gerard, Erin, Jody, Cool Bunny Slim, and Lorraine. Oh, no, that was just Lorraine welcoming the new members. Lorraine has been along quite a while. Thank you so much for 5 gifted memberships. Yeah, so let's.
Or you can just lay it down on its side.
Fast
I
forward.
think I was asking you what a forensic serology,
Fluid, biological evidence that may be suitable for DNA analysis.
and what kind of experience of training do you have in the field of forensic serology?
Well, my training, first of all, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Biological Sciences from University of California at Davis. I also have a Master's of Public Health with a specialty in Forensic Science from University of California, Berkeley. Prior to my employment in Colorado, I was employed in the same capacity for approximately 10 years as also a forensic DNA analyst and serologist in various crime labs in California. Most serology training actually does occur on the job. There are a few formal classes.
Yeah, as Steve said, this is an introduction. So I will try to skip forward to the more interesting parts here, so we can get the.
As to what the results of your blood test was.
So when I
or whether the presence of blood in these types of items, how would that impact your DNA packet, or whether or not you create a DNA packet with regards to what the results of your blood test was?
So when I am looking for blood, that's always starts with a visual exam. If I see staining that is consistent with visually looks like blood, we then do a chemical color test. It's a presumptive test for blood, meaning it's not a confirmatory test for blood, but it does indicate the presence of that. If I have a stain area that looks like blood, reacts to that chemical presumptive test, I typically will take a small cutting or a swabbing of that stain, trying to preserve additional stain, not take the whole sample when I can. And then that would go into a test tube. That test tube then goes into the DNA packet. I also do what we call trace swabbing, and trace swabbing is areas that may contain DNA cells or cells that have DNA. So many of our tests are so sensitive now in DNA analysis that we don't actually need to have a stain present. We can also get a DNA profile from just a very small number of just cells. Cells can be deposited just through touch or from wearing clothing, that kind of thing. So some of my serology examination is also doing trace swabbing. So areas in which I don't actually see a stain, but may be interested in DNA results from maybe through someone having touched an item per se.
Okay. And we'll get to those as we go through the individual items. Did you have several individual physical pieces of evidence that you examined and performed a serological examination on those items?
Yes, I did.
And would you also receive swabs from various areas of a residence 6627?
Yes, buccal swabs are swabs that are taken from the inside of the cheeks and the gum area, and those are taken as a reference standard or a known DNA standard that will be later on used for comparison purposes.
I guess while we're doing that, let's pull out 185 as well. What is People's Exhibit 185?
DNA standards for Gannon's biological mother, Landon. Okay. Yes, this also contains 2 sets of swabs.
And so are those buccal swabs as well from Gannon's mother?
Yes, these are buccal swabs also collected as reference standards from Gannon's mother.
Now, we're doing this together, but I'm assuming when you conduct a test, you're doing things individually, right? You're not mixing and matching items of evidence?
So we have yes, that's correct. We have a very set process on how we examine items of evidence in the lab. We always, before we even start any examination, we do a thorough cleaning of our workspace using bleach. We know that DNA, because it's so sensitive, our testing procedures are so sensitive, they are prone to contamination. So we have to be very careful, make sure we don't leave our own DNA on any evidence. So that involves wearing protective face coverings and hand coverings and gloves, hair coverings as well. And then we also want to make sure that there's no contaminating DNA on our work surfaces. So those are always bleached down in between every single item of evidence. We always lay out a fresh piece of like white butcher paper. So the evidence actually doesn't even touch any of our work surfaces. Any of our implements are cleaned as well. And then we always look at the order in which we look at items of evidence is also important. We try to look at evidence items that may have potentially low amounts of DNA before we would look at evidence items that have high amounts of DNA, something that would be very bloody, would have an expected high amount of DNA. We wouldn't want that to contaminate our work surfaces at all. So the order in which we examine is important. And then lastly, we always look at reference samples last after looking at all the other evidence items.
And with regards to People's Exhibit 184 and 185, what did you do exactly to create a DNA packet for those 2 buccal swabs?
So the buccal swabs, individually, of course, one by one, examining those, my role was just to take a portion of one of the buccal swabs. I essentially it's like a long Q-tip, like a Q-tip head with a long stick. That's what the swab is. And I just take a sterile scalpel and I just portion off one part of the swab. That goes into a sterile tube, which is then labeled with the associated barcode number that we've given it. And that tube is that I've created goes into the DNA packet.
And I'm referencing your February.
Yeah, so as I see it, this is a very good foundation for this is how we do it. This is how we assure that nothing is contaminated. In my opinion, so far, this is good.
Well, can I push back a little bit on you on this?
Sure.
See, I really think, and if you want to learn how to be a great lawyer, become a defense attorney, because these questions, I don't have it here. I have it at the office, but there is a book called Predicate Questions for Prosecutors. All the prosecutor is doing is reading off the predicate questions. So you basically, anybody who could read, I could teach a 6th grader to do this. All they have to do is read through the predicate questions and qualify this person. It's a written down standard issue of questions that they do. Yes, you're right. It's comprehensive, but it's not like this prosecutor's that great. He's just reading the list. So, so it's pushed back a little bit, not a lot, but I'm just saying that that's what he's doing. It's not like it's so impressive. I have another. Can I throw out something else while we're taking a little break here?
Sure.
A little homework for the chat while they're listening. They can do 2 things at once, right?
Yeah.
If you want to find a case that our office, my office, is intimately involved in, and I'm going to brag on one of my office mates, my division chief, the Capital Division Chief, whose name is Nancy Ryan. And she represented a guy named Carl Dausch, D-A-U-S-C-H, in the Supreme Court of Florida. Mr. Dausch was convicted basically on DNA evidence, was convicted and put on death row. And my office mate walked him off death row from murder conviction to not guilty. That in 2000, this was 2014. Carl Dausch, C-A-R-L-D-A-U-S-C-H versus Florida. And you can read about it because his DNA evidence was in a vehicle that is associated with him. But you will see that there was lots of reasonable doubt. But because of the overemphasis of juries and prosecutors on DNA, they ended up convicting a man when there was lots of reasonable doubt whether he did it. So, and that's my office. We have plaques in our office up to Nancy for winning that case, because it was not very often do you walk a person off of death row. And that was, so anyway, I'm just plugging in there while we're here, come work for our office in Daytona Beach, St. Johns County, St. Augustine, Florida, and we'll teach you how to do it right. This is easy what they're doing.
No, but this is, so to say, the baseline.
Yes,
you have to do this, and you have to know this as a prosecutor.
Right.
A baseline. Yeah. But let's go on a bit.
8th, 2020 report, if you need to refresh your recollection. But do you recall looking at a piece of tan carpet that was rolled up inside of another piece of carpet that was found in the storage room at 6627 Mandan Drive.
Yes.
And what were you looking at in regards to that carpet?
So I was looking for the possible presence of blood.
Did you see with your eye the presence of possible blood?
I did.
And what did you do upon seeing that?
So once I visually see staining that looks like it may be blood, I then do the chemical color presumptive test, which was positive for the presence of blood on the carpet. And then I do, actually on the back of that rolled up piece of carpet, I then swabbed a portion of that potential blood staining. So that portion of that swab can go in the test tube and then into the DNA packet for further analysis.
And do you have People's Exhibit 386 there next on the list?
Yes.
What is People's Exhibit 386?
Let's see.
So these
This
are items
is
that
3
already
sets of
been
possible blood
introduced into
swabs.
evidence by previous witnesses. So these are the evidence collectors, the cops who have collected that and say where these things are come from. Now, all of these items are in evidence, and this person tested one against the other, and it's going to opine on the matching. So now they're familiarizing this witness with these particular items. This is cool.
Yeah.
This is a very standard thing you see in courts all the time in criminal cases.
And what are those blood swabs from? Does it indicate on the
It
envelope?
does, yes. These are identified using placards A, B, and C, collected from the stairs and the floor of the garage.
And so, what are these? Are these Q-tips or am I being too general here?
It's very much like a Q-tip. Their swabs come in sterile packaging. So
I think
typically
we
there's
can
a sterile
move
wrapper,
forward.
and within there are 2 swabs that they are, when our crimes investigation collected from southeast corner of southeast room, child
We're
room of
still
basement.
on collecting.
Was it your understanding that there was a large area of blood in the corner of his?
Nike shoe, and then there's some indications on the bottom, handwritten swabs from Nike shoes, laundry room, right shoe.
And so, are those consistent with People's Exhibit 378, the Nike shoes that you just talked about?
Yeah, they actually were swabbed prior to being submitted into the lab. The outsole was swabbed.
And did you submit that on to DNA analysis?
Sure.
Let's see if we are up
Let's
to.
now jump to your March 17th, 2020 report. And I'm going to hand you what's been admitted into evidence as People's Exhibit 423.
Yes.
I can just hold it for you to like.
Okay.
Do
Yes.
you recognize that?
I do recognize the label on it. I did not package it in this packaging, but yes, I recognize this is a plastic tub and lid with possible blood.
Did you examine this item?
I did.
Do you need to open it to look at it?
No, I don't.
Do you need me to open it?
No.
All right. What did you do with People's Exhibit 423?
This item was examined for the possible presence of blood, so I did do some visual examinations. That's how we always start all of our serology, and I did note that there was some red-brown staining on one short end of this plastic tub, on the tub and on the lid. I then did my chemical presumptive tests for blood, which were positive. I then took a number of different collections, swabs of these different blood stains or potential suspected blood stains, and those were then forwarded for the DNA analysis.
Can you just generally describe where you swabbed this item and how you labeled it for DNA analysis?
Sure. I collected one collection from the back of the scrub brush head, and suspected bloodstain was collected on the actual scrub brush bristles themselves.
And did that get forwarded on to DNA for DNA analysis?
It did, yes.
How about People's Exhibit 193?
We are still on.
The envelopes then had a description of where it had been collected from.
And since these are Blue Star swabs, did you just prepare these for DNA analysis?
Yeah, my preparation is just to sample or cut a portion of a swab to forward it on to DNA analysis.
We go to your June 17th report now and have you look at People's Exhibit 361. Did you swab this item for blood?
I did on the inside of this.
Open this suitcase and show the jury where you swabbed it?
Sadly,
Noted,
yeah,
staining in this area, this reddish brown
Now
staining,
she's-
which did react to the presumptive test for blood, and this was the area that was swabbed.
well, this was filmed through, I can only guess, Potato from 1987, but at least it's decent sound. But now she is in front of the jury showing stuff. Still, I guess, standard, this is the baseline where you should be when presenting DNA evidence and blood evidence for that matter. And
You'll see staining there?
I can't.
Is that your circle that's on this suitcase?
Yeah, I circled the stain area. That's just for when I take photographs. I've also noted LMG positive. LMG is just shorthand for leucomalachite green. That's leuco, L-E-U-C. That's too fast. It's the chemical presumptive test that I'm using in the lab. This LMG positive means it has reacted, and then I take photographs of this stain from various angles and with a scale. And I always like to have that notation in my photographs.
Are there other areas within this suitcase that you noted in swab?
There are other areas that I noted. I had seen other potential stains. Like, for example, there's one by lining. Actually, there's two that I have noted staining, but I circled and said LMG negative, meaning I did do the chemical presumptive test, but it did not react. So I don't swab stains that don't react to the presumptive test.
I'll be back just afterwards.
That's fine.
Did you forward these swabs from the suitcase on for DNA analysis?
Yes, I did.
We're still.
Did you also look at a blanket, People's Exhibit 365?
I did, yes.
This blanket was inside the suitcase when it was recovered?
Yes, I did put that in my report. Blue blanket recovered from within suitcase.
And those swabs, again, were forwarded on for DNA analysis.
Yeah, those were cuttings put into a test tube that was forwarded for DNA analysis.
Now, we don't have an exhibit that's titled Gannon's fingernails, but did you have an opportunity to examine the fingernails from autopsy from Gannon Stout?
I did, yes.
What did you do with those particular fingernails?
Just going to refer to my report and notes. Okay. Area was swabbed and then forwarded for DNA analysis.
Still on. We should get
Yeah, People's Exhibit 435.
result.
This is
Okay. Exhibit 339 is admitted.
request to publish.
You may go ahead.
So I'm going to show you Exhibit 339 first of all here. Did you help me prepare this particular exhibit?
I did.
And did Ms. Minogue also contribute to preparing this exhibit?
Yes, she did.
Could you just let the jury know what this exhibit is?
Yes, this is just a summary table of the different people's exhibit numbers with a description of the item, and we've gone through all of those today. And then for my purposes, it does have a column that lists what the serology results were as far as whether it was presumptive positive.
For instance, where it says blue star in your column, would that be something you didn't test for blood because the blue star already eliminated there?
Correct.
And so did you contribute to the item and the serology aspect of this particular exhibit?
In preparing, yes, I confirmed with all of my reports that that is accurate, correct?
And we'll be using this exhibit again with Ms. Minogue. Any further questions, Your Honor?
Cross-examination, Mr. Cook.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Ms. Holes? All right. Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I only got the person who. I'm quite sure there will be presentation of the actual. Or is it?
Name, spell your last for the record, and introduce yourself to the jury.
My name's Donna Minogue, and my last name is spelled Manogue. I'm currently a DNA analyst and serologist with the Colorado Springs Police Department Metro Crime Lab.
How long have you been a DNA analysis?
Okay.
Analyst.
And this
Okay,
is
so-
also quite typical because what you've got is you've got multiple handlers of this evidence, right? And so you get the evidence comes in. There's a procedure. It comes in and it goes through a chain, and the person that actually does the analysis may be different from the person who does the collection. There's a big issue. Oftentimes, we have called a constitutional right of confrontation. And what happens a lot of times is the office is considered a whole, and the person who actually did the testing does not come and testify. Instead, there's a supervisor who testifies off of the report of the third party. And when it's an issue, because they review the thing, when it's an issue, right? If it's not an issue, we don't worry about it. But when it's an issue, so having a healthy level of skepticism from the defense side is really important. If sadly, the prosecutors just buy into whatever. Oh yeah, it's no problem. Nothing's a problem. Nothing's ever a problem. But you have, as a defense attorney, you've kind of got to question everything and build the case from the ground up. And what's your theory? But this is common. You'll see, a couple people handling it, and then the person who's ultimately going to opine that it's a match or it's not a match. And they're not going to say it's a match. What they're going to say is, this is, within 1 and 20 billion people on Earth. And then they'll say, well, how many people on Earth? Well, 8 billion. So this is approximately three times the population of the Earth, right? Yes, something like that. So it's and the way they get that is they multiply the alleles. So let's say you have 13 different genetic markers, right? So you've got a marker 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, these genetic markers can have a statistical probabilities attached to them for certain identification sets. So like, if you have a particular DNA strand on that allele, right? That might happen in 1 out of 150 people. But then you start multiplying them over 13 different strands, and you get huge numbers. That's why they can be. So that's why they focus on these, because most humans are identical genetically. It's only these certain factors that are identifying characteristics that go to the individual. And you have a DNA on this one that might be 1 in 150. This one may be a 1 in 300. And then when you add them all up, it becomes unique, at least unique in a statistical way, right? 1 in 10 billion. So that's sort of thing. So that's what you're going to hear.
Did I say that?
Analysis, yes. Analyst, actually.
Analyst.
Get that all wrong.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Fast.
I've been a DNA analyst since about 1999. Prior to working here at the CSPD Crime Lab, I retired from the Albuquerque Police Department Crime Lab doing
Field prior to that.
6. It's about 20 years because each location requires you to train in their particular procedures. It took about 2 years.
In a criminal case, in criminal investigation.
They're obtained, essentially an investigator will provide known samples and they will be submitted to evidence. And then if it's on a request that I receive, I will analyze that. From him, I was not able to obtain full profiles on those samples.
Were you able to obtain enough to know whether or not there was a connection between his fingernails and the toothbrush, for instance?
Yes, I was.
And tell the jury about that. What did you find?
Well, I found a low-level DNA profile, but there was enough information to calculate a statistic on to match them to each other.
No, that's interesting what she just said there. That was interesting. I almost want to hear that one again.
Okay. No, let's.
Yeah. See, when you do trials enough, your antenna, like most of the time, I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm doing other work, and then when it goes by, it's like, oh, wait a second, something. Your ears perk up, and you're like, objection, Yara, can we approach?
She just bone that they did DNA analysis on in Florida.
We did, yes.
And was there a match with regards to what profile they obtained in Florida?
Yes, with the toothbrush sample.
Okay. And so the last item I want to talk to you about was Gannon Stout's fingernails. Were you able to do DNA analysis on his fingernails as well?
I did perform DNA on the fingernails in an attempt to get a DNA type that would verify that a known DNA sample from him. I was not able to obtain full profiles on those samples.
Were you able to obtain enough to know whether or not there was a connection between his fingernails and the toothbrush, for instance?
Yes, I was.
And tell the jury about that. What did you find?
Well, I found a low-level.
See there's an issue here. Okay. And that is, you either can or you cannot. This is the issue of partial DNA profiling, and again, I am not a DNA expert on this issue. Okay, but how far can you opine? See, if she does not have a full statistical profile, it is not able to generate a statistical number, then she doesn't have a full profile. Then how is it that she's saying it's matching? You see, this is that you kind of get into a borderline. Like, for example, what if you say, I can tell from this DNA sample that it's a black male? Okay, well, how many millions and millions of black males? Well, isn't that consistent with the defendant sitting over here, right? You see, or what if we say we can just how statistically close does it need to be to say that this is consistent? Or at some point, you just say, look, it's inconclusive. So I want to hear more about what she's saying here, because what she's doing is she's not saying I have a 1 in 10 billion match. She's saying we achieved a partial sample, and it's consistent with this other sample from the fingernails of the defendant, right? Yeah. But not enough to form a statistical opinion. Well, then what are you forming here? What are you opining on? I want to hear more. This is the kind of thing you'd want to pre-vet. This is the kind of thing that you would definitely have a deposition with this expert. You'd have your expert there, and you would have them advising you on what she's saying here, because this could be good or could be bad. But my ears are pricking up here.
Yeah, but at least she's saying it.
Yes.
So you can be. Yeah.
She's saying it, but is that proper? They can say a lot of stuff. It could be improper. I would definitely have my expert. This would have been done before trial. So you would have a deposition taken of her. You would ask her these questions. She would answer in this way, because if she's not answering this way, then she's impeachable by deposition, right? But if she answers this way, well, she's answered this way previously. And then the defense attorney needs to go out and get a secondary examination and say, is this proper testimony? If the defense attorney is doing their job, if they're mailing it in, then it just blows by and nobody cares, and they get to opine on whatever they want, and it sounds really bad, and people get convicted on bad science, right? You see, this is how it works. So let's now you got my ears just wet.
Yeah, but let's continue.
DNA profile, but there was enough information to calculate a statistic on to match them to each other.
Based on everything you just talked about, is the profile that you obtained from the toothbrush in the beginning the DNA profile for Dan and Starow?
Yes.
And is that the profile you used in your analysis of particular unknown items, particularly from 6627, Mandan Drive, and other areas with regards to the profile from Dan and Starow?
That is the profile that I used until I obtained the bone sample profile, which was more the toothbrush sample is what we consider a secondary standard, not knowing who the individual is, and the bone sample just verified that. But yes, I did use the toothbrush sample for comparison.
Okay. Did you also obtain some buccal swabs from the defendant, Letitia Stout here, and obtain a DNA profile from those buccal swabs?
Yes, I did.
And did you also use that in your analysis when you're comparing knowns to unknowns?
Correct.
At this time, I'd like to publish Exhibit 339 on the TV screen, just so everyone can see it as we're talking about
From
it.
prosecution over here.
We're going to put People's Exhibit 339 up, which is a chart that's already in evidence. You may recognize it from the TV screen. Did you help contribute to making this chart?
Yes, I did.
And is this a good summary of the items that you tested and the results that you have on those particular items?
It is, yes.
I know we're giving away the answer early on this exhibit, but I think it's helpful for the jury to kind of follow us as we talk about particular things. The first item up there is Exhibit 386, which are swabs from the garage, placards A, B, and C. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you get those items, what did you do, and how did you do your DNA analysis on those particular items?
Well, the swabs were already prepared for me during the serology examination. So what I end up with for the DNA examination is essentially an envelope of tubes with a corresponding number to them, and then I match them back up when I write the report. So I simply did DNA analysis on these swabs.
What did you find with regards to the swab from placard A?
The swab from placard A, the major profile matched Gann and Stauch with an estimated frequency of 1 in 3.4 octillion.
And when you say major profile, why do you describe it as a major profile?
Because in that particular sample, I had a mixture of more than one individual, and I was able to parse out a major contributor to that according to our standardized operating procedures.
Yeah, this is another issue, is mixed DNA profiles. Yeah, this is really good stuff. If you know, it's very interesting. Someone said, sounds like a fascinating job. It is. Oh, Danielle, yeah, this is my mentor. Yeah, this is, if you want to do something cool, this is it. But it's a very scientific job. These people, you look at their qualifications, you know, not ridiculous. You get a bachelor's degree in a chemistry or a science. It's a great way to get involved. But you see what I said there, that the first witness was the one that prepared the samples. And then this is the witness that does the actual testing. So that's why we had, the other was a chain of custody witness, really.
Octillion.
Octillion, yeah. More than a billion.
That is a number equal to 1 followed by 27 zeros.
Okay. So a large number. It's, what is it? Million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, septillion, octillion. I think that's it.
Yeah. Something, yeah. I'm not good at math, but I know that David, who you saw as MLS Law Show, a great channel, we will do the Joni Aris rewatch later this
When
month.
was this trial here that you're watching?
This is ongoing.
Oh, it's
So
ongoing.
this is
It's current.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is day 13, but I believe the defense just got their expert psychiatrist. Her testimony was massacred on cross. And her, during the expert, the defense is innocent by reason of insanity. They claim that she has dissociative identity disorder, and that was what this their expert witness was testifying to, and that was a, where's my mug? It was the cluster F, really bad. So they're probably going to have closing on Friday.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Good trial.
Yeah, really long, whining trial filled with evidence. And I believe in that they claim that one of her past personalities, they claim,
Oh, it's a
haven't
multi-personality disorder issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that the thing is that my ears perk up on things that are out of line with normal.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that this is improper. Okay. I just want to make it clear there. What I'm saying is it makes I tune in differently. Like when they're asking them, where did you go to school? That to me doesn't matter. And I'm a trial attorney, and it's a learned skill. And, when you do 80 so trials that I've done, your ears are tuned into what's going on in the courtroom like this. And you can do, and this is that sort of thing. Like, I'm like, wait a second, what's going on there? It may not be an issue at all. It depends on the previous testimony and depends on it depends on a lot of things. But so anyway, I don't want to overemphasize my objections, because I'm not sure if it's a question is what it is, right? I have a question about what she said, not saying that I know it's wrong or it's right. All right. So I don't want to overly criticize.
Yeah, and I've been a union rep for well over 30 years. I've done between 50 and 100 negotiations per year. You get a bullshit meter.
Right.
Yeah.
You got it.
You can sit there, listen to the normal stuff, and all of a sudden, what was that?
Yeah, the ear, like you say, most of it you've heard it a million times, and it's like yes, click, click, click.
Yeah.
And that's like, wait a second, that's it. Yeah, I got
you.
you.
Reference this law and this president and blah 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 blah. But we believe that this is a. Wait, you believe?
Right.
Yeah. But let's continue, because I find this testimony is really interesting.
I was able to pull out a major profile, and that major profile matched again in Starow.
And do you have any standards on how you determine whether or not a mixture you can determine a major profile? How many contributors need to be in there for you to do that analysis?
In order to pull out a major profile, I have to follow our standard operating procedure, which is written up. It's called the mixture interpretation policy. And essentially, the major contributor has to be 2.5 to 3 times higher than the other contributors in that mixture. So by following my standard operating procedure, I was able to pull out a major profile.
How many contributors were in this mixture with regards to black?
I would have to check my report for that.
Sure, that would refresh your recollection.
Yes.
Top of page.
From swab A, I had a mixture of 2 contributors, one of which was male. That major profile, the major male profile, matched again in Starow.
And we know this is at least presumptively blood. Is blood a very enriched item that has DNA in it?
It's a very rich source of DNA, yes.
Is it common, for instance, when you're swabbing a garage floor, or for the instance, this podium, you might find several different profiles on it?
You could, yes.
Is the fact that it may be blood, would that contribute to Gannon being the major profile in this 2-person mixture?
I can't say that the DNA, I can only tell you that because it was presumptively positive for blood, we know there's a good indication that there's blood in here, but I can only tell you that the major profile is attributable to Gannon and Starow.
Okay. What about placard B?
Placard B, that was also a mixture of 2 contributors, one of which was male, and the major male profile matched again in Starow at, again, estimated frequency of 1 in 3.4 octillion.
And so when the jury has this chart back in deliberations, People's Exhibit 339, where it says major profile matches Gannon, is that always going to be a mixture?
Not necessarily. A major, yes. When you hear the term major, that means that the DNA profile was a mixture, but that a major was able to be parsed out of that.
Whereas we get the placard C where it says matches Gannon. Tell us about placard C.
Placard C was a single source male profile, and that profile matched Gannon and Starow with an estimated frequency of 1 in 3.4 octillion.
And so when there's a single source profile with People's Exhibit 339, indicate that item matches Gannon.
Correct.
Just so we're clear. So mixtures, you'll see the word major profile.
Yes.
Source, you'll just see match.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a little.
You've thrown out the.
It's a little see, this is the thing. See, I deal with non-DNA stuff a lot, and when expert witnesses say match, okay, I don't like that. Now, this is the defense attorney in me, because 1 in 8 octillion is a match, okay? But it's funny because why don't you just say it's 1 in octillion? So this is a funny cross which I've seen sometimes from defense attorneys, which is it possible?
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, it's possible that 1 in octillion, 8 octillion, right? Yes, but it's like it reminds me of the joke about the guy approaches the woman and says, hey, baby, would you have sex with me, right? And she says, I wouldn't have sex with you unless you were the last person on earth. And so he's like, oh, you mean there is a possibility?
Yeah. And
So,
even in one in octazillion or wherever, there's only one possibility for another match, and that would be
right,
an
and you don't
identical
want to lose
twin.
credibility with your jury by asking a dumb question, but I've seen it done multiple times by defense attorneys.
Can you rule out he has an identical twin?
Well, and that's a very good question, right? You see there, you do. Oh
Yeah.
boy, Nick, coming hitting one out of the park.
But then you have to prove that there actually is one, or at least there's a probability, and everything like that. I watched a bit of CSI, I have to admit. Did you freeze? No.
Nope,
No, you're still here.
I'm just waiting on the here.
The probability, you said 1 in 3.4 octillion. Is that what you said?
Correct.
And what does that mean? What does that mean to this jury?
An octillion is a 3. For instance, we just rounded off to 3 octillion. That's a 3 followed by 27 zeros.
And why do we do that?
27, so-
It's to give you an indication of the uniqueness of the profile, how often each of the alleles occur in the general population.
And so is it also to confirm that that is in fact Gannon's blood in placard C on the garage?
We don't provide source attribution. We don't say this profile originates from. We provide you with the fact that it's a match and the statistic that gives you an indication of the uniqueness of the profile.
I hate when lawyers ask you that.
Yes.
I won't ask you again. Okay. Let's go to People's Exhibit 503, which is labeled Carpet 1 from Gannon's room. What did you do with that, and what did you find?
Again, this was in a tube already prepared for me, and it was extracted or examined. It was analyzed for the DNA profile. And that's 506, you said, or 503?
It's People's Exhibit 503, so it would be in your report.
Cutting from the
It'd be
top of the carpet?
Yeah, right.
Yes, that cutting from the top of the carpet was a single source male profile that matched Gannon-Stauch with an estimated frequency of 1 in 3.4 octillion.
And did you also do a DNA analysis?
Now, this continues like this, the same extreme high numbers.
Right. Actually, I'm way off on my trillion. So it's million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, sextillion, septillion, octillion.
Yeah, but this is, in my opinion, at least, this is should be the standard.
Sure.
This is a good DNA presentation.
Right. But how close does he? Here's my question to the panel. Here's my question to the chat and to the people who are listening. Is how close does it have to be in order to be called a match? Because these numbers are clearly not challengeable, right? But what if it was 1 in 1,000? All right, and or what if it was 1 in 500? Where is the line that becomes either not admissible at science, opinion excludable? How is it 1 in 10,000? 1 in 50,000, 1 in a million? What number is it? I mean, I have a friend in my office, and fingerprints are also pretty good science, but there was a wrongful conviction based on a matched fingerprint. And because it said, well, nobody has the same fingerprints. Well, it turns out they did. And is that really how good a science? And how good are the fingerprints? How are good? And what happens is, the science below these things. See, I mean, this DNA is the gold standard because we know we have statistical sets of, there's the Genome Project. We know these identifying alleles on each chromosome. We know which ones are identifying. We know the probabilities that they occur within nature. That math is strong. Okay. But when we start getting these lower numbers, talk dirty to me. Yes, that's right. Well, I am adorably dorky. So, so that distracted me. See, now I've got somebody, well, I forget where I was going with that, but no, it is a question about like fingerprints. These people, a lot of these people here are trained to say something. Well, do they really know this? Well, they know it because the science has been tested. But has the science on fingerprints, okay, what they say is, well, this loop, and then there's an eyeball comparison, and it matches up on a computer, but you get partial prints. How good are the sample prints? And do we know that these loops, like, okay, do we know that if you have 13 connecting that is identical, that's a match? I don't know. how good is this science? And then you start cutting it below that. And see, that's why, I mean, everybody who's watched me knows that I rant and rave about firearm and ballistic matching, because tool mark evidence is garbage, because they don't have databases that can establish these type of numbers. You know, that's the difference. There is no database, but they're taught as practitioners, as people like this, experts. I went to school, and the handbook tells me that if I can link up 13 striations, it's a match. Well, they say that, and the manual says that, but the manual was it's a faux science thing. They just came up, it's arbitrary. There's no independent testing. So, and there's no way to falsify it. There's no databases. There's no samples. There's no scientific, like, see, when they're saying this chromosome appears on this thing at a certain percentage, we know that. That's very scientifically validated, right? This is a good comparison to see where you're going to, I don't know. What was the question?
Your question was, at what would be the number where it stops being
right
inclusive?
Well, I'm asking it more of a rhetorical question to you to think about. It's one of those questions we need to think about as a society, because somebody's going to prison for the rest of their life based on that answer sometimes.
Yeah. And with that, I'm actually going to go into the next trial. This is Wisconsin versus Zachariah Anderson, and you have, this time it is Lisa Treffinger. She is employed by Wisconsin State Lab. You have the same foundations, but here she is the same person who collected, and who, in her and one other technician collected. She did the testing, and she will now present the smoking gun, the evidence that convicted Zachariah Anderson. Well, the sentencing is now on the May 15th or 16th. I know his brother Solomon is in the chat waiting for your opinion on this. Let's see here. Share this.
Well, and see, a lot of this is, where is it located? Where did they pull the DNA from? That's really, really important. It's everything. In fact, it can be meaningless or it can be conclusive. You know, it's very important where these samples are coming from. You know, obviously the DNA from the defendant, but where, you know, what are they testing, and how does that have meaning within the context of the case?
I agree.
Yeah,
so,
I remember this guy. I've seen him before. Oh, this is the Anderson case. Yeah. Okay, I didn't follow this real closely. I know that most people that were following it were very upset by the verdict, saying that the evidence was thin. So, I'm seeing with fresh eyes here.
Yeah.
Were involved in looking physically at that vehicle and making any findings that you have?
I went to the garage, I believe it was on May 21st.
I'll slow it down.
May 21st of 2020.
That's correct.
And when you say the garage, what are you talking about?
So in our laboratory, we have 3 bays that we refer to as the garage. We were able to work on vehicles.
And that it would be the standard place you would try to analyze a vehicle?
Yeah.
It's enclosed?
It's enclosed, yes.
And why would you care if you worked in an enclosed space as opposed to out in the open?
Well, we want it to be secured. We want to try to control it. We don't want it to be affected by the elements of the weather, sunlight, rain, things like that.
So let me ask you that. Does rain impact an ability to find DNA evidence or blood evidence if rain impacts any surface where there otherwise might be blood?
So the rain could potentially wash it away or dilute the blood.
So you don't want a vehicle you're going to work on, even if you're just going to work on the interior, you don't want any part of it to be exposed to the rain because you're worried that'll compromise an ability to look at DNA?
Yes, you would prefer it to be protected and secured.
So at the point that in May, when you were looking at this in the garage, were you being assisted by anybody else?
At that point, I was actually assisting someone else. That analyst was assigned to process the vehicle.
And so when you say they were assigned to process the vehicle, what's that person supposed to physically be doing in that role at the crime lab at that time?
So that analyst is looking over the vehicle. They're taking notes, they're taking photographs of it, they're documenting. They're doing screening tests, they're collecting any evidence that they deem as probative.
Yeah, the sound is quite bad, so I slowed it down a bit.
For believed to be the overwhelming majority of that process as was going on with this other analyst?
I was kind of in and out. Whenever she asked me to look at something, I would go there. I didn't stand with her the whole time, no.
So you were sort of a consultant?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And what about any photography that occurred in that process? Who was in charge of that?
I did not do any photography. She may have, or another analyst at the lab may have done the photography.
So I'm going to show you, first of all, what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 1, photo 311. So again, this is Exhibit 1, photo 311. Looking at that, do you recognize the interior of some kind of structure?
Yeah, this is the car, the van, where the prosecution alleges that Zachariah transported the body of Greatly Jr. And Greatly Jr. was a little over 6 feet tall and somewhere between 250 and 270 pounds, rolled into a blood-soaked carpet. And that is why they claim that this back part of the carpet was cut out just to set the base. And that he drove around with the body in the car back to his place, and the morning after, he drove to Walmart, and then somewhere after Walmart, he disposed of the body because there is no body. They have not found Greatly Jr.'s body.
How big is this guy, the defendant? He doesn't look like that big a guy.
He is below 6 feet and 220.
220. He's the defendant's 220?
Was at the time, they believe. Between 200 and 220.
It seems like, a 270-pound dead weight wrapped in a carpet is rather unwieldy, but I guess it's possible. But it would be a lot of manhandling, I would think. So,
yeah.
But
there are no drag marks in the apartment, so you have to have actually picked him up.
No drag marks?
No drag marks in the victim's apartment.
What is the mechanism of death, supposedly? Well, we don't have a body. Are they saying?
They claim he was first bludgeoned by because they found wood splinters of processed wood, so either an axe handle or a baseball bat or something of the sort. And then due to a prison snitch who claims that the defendant that
was the dream admission. Yeah, that's irrelevant. No, but if it was a bat attack, there would be blood all over the place.
Yeah, but then they say that they also then stabbed him. Yeah, even though there's no actual, they didn't call in a blood spatter expert.
Did or did not?
Did not. Was
there blood in the apartment?
It was quite a bit of blood in the apartment, but let's just say I've been around farms all my life, and I do know how to butcher animals, pigs. And a pig, a 270-pound pig, has the rough amount of blood as a human being has. So I do know how much blood it would have taken for a person to bleed out. And in my opinion, the amount of blood in the apartment is substantial, but I'm not convinced it is enough.
Well, and there's a lot of question about, the corpus delicti, which is the actual Latin on that, I believe, is without the body. So it's, without the body, you don't have a case. I know that people have made a lot about that, but you can convict of murder for a missing person, but the circumstantial evidence needs to point to the death. And there's a lot of law on that. There was a guy, I think it was in England, who ground up his bodies and disposed them in the Thames. who was convicted of murder, and he thought that if he destroyed the body, that there would be no case if they didn't. That is not true. There can be circumstantial evidence of death. So one of the elements of a murder is the death of an individual. Now, and it's possible. So if you have blood and you have all communications ending, that can be circumstantial evidence of death. But how they tie this guy, Mr. Anderson, who's a smaller, somebody said in the chat, he's got a back problem, and transporting it in a carpet in this van.
And this van, they claimed, had a smell of bleach, but cops' noses,
was there scientific testing of that? I hate smell evidence because that is the most easily fraudulently created evidence. And, it's like, how do you test? In fact, we had a case, the Casey Anthony case, that talked about the stench of death was in the car, and is there a smeller? How do we test this? How, as a defense attorney, how do I challenge that testimony? It's very like, a lot of times you get that police officers who will say, oh, I smelled marijuana and that allowed me to get into the car because I smelled it. And then they search the car and they find pills, but no marijuana. Right. Well, how did that happen? Or was maybe the police just making up the smell of marijuana in order to get into the car? So it's a little that. But what's the DNA? So where is the DNA in this van?
Yeah, let's continue.
There's got to be blood DNA all over this van.
Let's continue, and we can talk after this testimony.
Okay.
Sure, that it seems like the vehicle is in this situation.
Yes, I do.
Okay, what's the building we're in or the structure we're in?
We're in the garage at the lab. It's the center bay.
Okay, and is this in fact a photograph of what the scene looked like when you were being brought in as a consultant on this case?
Yes, it was.
Is this the van that you were involved in reporting in the first crime lab report we talked about March 29, 2021?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it's identified as a Dodge Caravan in your report. Is that what you believe it to be?
Yes.
Okay, and is the condition of the Dodge Caravan as you see it in this picture the way you saw it in this consultation? In other words, with the carpet out of it, doors open, those kind of things?
Yes, it was.
And it wasn't your job to, with a fine-tooth comb, look at every area, right? You were just being brought in on occasion?
That is correct.
Okay. And so when you were being brought in, at some point, were you consulted about an item that was on the driver's side, which you ultimately identified as A2, a swab with a stain? I'm talking about now the driver's side.
Yes, I think that we did discuss that. Yes.
Okay, and what do you recall being the thing you were being asked to consult on as to A2? And if I gave you a pointer, would you be able to give me an approximate location of A2?
This guy's really annoying.
Not really.
Okay.
He's very
was
arrogant.
it in the back section of this van?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Oh, I can't hear you.
Boomer moment. Boomer moment. I actually put in the chat button for boomer moments so they can warn me as well. So there's a boomer emoji in the chat. This is the boss of the prosecutor in the Rittenhouse case.
Oh, great. Is he the elected official?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah,
So,
the arrogance is just dripping off him. A little healthy skepticism and humility goes a long way. Even if you know the answer, I think coming at it from a position of questioning. See, he's coming at it like, I know this case and I know what happened and I want the answers that you're going to give me and I'm going to command you to give me my answers. Well, this guy doesn't know what happened. The witnesses do. You question the witnesses from a position of humility. I mean, I know that's just me, and sadly, I've seen this type of prosecutor a lot, but they get off on their sense of I know everything and I'm going to correct. I don't know. The personality is coming through very strong and I don't like it. But and the fact that you said he's Kyle Rittenhouse's prosecutor boss, the elected official, I mean, that says a lot there. But just the arrogance is quite bad. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen that. Let's see what the testimony says. But
Mm.
I remember this guy because I did tune into a couple things during this trial. I forget what it was, but I remember this guy, and I didn't like him then, and I don't like him now. It's reminded me of a little flashback moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the back section. It was in the cargo area.
Okay. So without knowing exactly where, what was it you were being asked to consult on A2?
If it had the right coloring, would it be potential to be a stain? Should it be collected?
Okay. And was there a chemical compound being utilized to do some assistance in detecting whether there was anything of evidentiary value as part of the process that you were being consulted on?
Yes, the analyst was doing some luminol, and I'm not sure if she had done this before or after, but luminol is what she was going to do or had done.
And was there a result regarding luminol on A2 that at least caused the two of you to feel like a consultation was appropriate?
I can't remember if the luminol was done on that one or if it was just more a color that we saw and we collected.
Okay. In general, what is luminol?
So luminol is a liquid that's sprayed over surfaces, and it gives you an indication if there is blood. But it also reacts with other things as well.
Like cleaning agents?
Yes, like cleaning agents, rust.
And so you don't recall if there was some indicating using luminol that would cause you two to want to discuss this. That's not, you don't remember one way or another?
Yeah, I did. So I didn't perform the luminol, and I didn't write the report on it.
Okay. Who were you discussing, just so the jury knows if that person shows up later?
That would be Julie Avila. She's a specialist in the crime scene response unit.
Okay, so she had a job that was making interpretations of crime scenes, much like you did in terms of helping determine what might be of evidentiary value.
Correct. She is also a team lead. Yes.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you guys take a swab of a stain or an item in that back, in that rear cargo portion, based on the consultation we've spoken about?
Referring to on the driver's side?
A2, yes.
Yes, there was a swab that was collected and that I did work.
And what was the determination of that?
So A2, again, there was not blood detected on that.
Okay. And so that wasn't blood at all?
No.
Okay. And was there anything about that when you observed it where you said to yourself, oh, that's blood? Did you have that opinion at the time?
No, I think what I recall is saying it has possibilities. You should probably be collected and we'll try to see what we can get.
Okay. And you found it wasn't blood?
No, it was not.
All right. Then was there another place that you talked about identified as A1?
Yes, there was.
Okay. So I'm now going to show you, again, from Exhibit 1, photo 313. And is there a sticker there that was only there because the state crime lab decided to place it there to mark something that they thought was of interest?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask that the judge give you a pointer and the microphone. Old school pointer, Mr. Trevinger. So if you could just point out where the sticker is that is of interest, so the jury can be oriented as to where we're talking about.
If you can see it, it's like right there.
Okay, so really all you can tell in this picture is a sticker showing you a location, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, but you recall that being the location that was of interest?
Yes, that was the location.
Okay, and do you remember how you came to be consulted on that particular item? Again, only if you remember the specifics.
Yes, so analyst Avila asked me across the garage. She said, I saw something.
Is that on? If it is, you need it a little closer to your, okay.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. Analyst Avila called me out to the garage, asked me to look at this. She said, I saw it. It's about at my eye height. I'm a bit taller than she is. That's why I remember it. And I looked at it and I said, yeah, that's the right coloring. I think we need to collect that on one swab.
And were you concerned about the quantity in terms of decisions you made at that time?
Yes, it was a very tiny speck, like a pinhead dot of a dark stain.
And so now I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 1, photo 314. Are we a little closer in on this picture?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And again, can you just point for the jury? You probably still can't, probably still not quite big enough to see, but is it under that little sticker?
Yeah, it's like right about there.
Okay. At that point, was a decision made? You said it should be collected, correct?
Yes, that's
Was luminol put on it?
No.
Why not?
No, I didn't. I said do not luminol this because it's a spray, it's a liquid, it will dilute it, and you want to collect everything as possible that's there.
And now I'm going to show you Exhibit 1, and this is number 315. Is that a picture where you can actually now, at this illumination or increase of size, I'm not coming up with the word, at this size, are you able to now see the speck visible in this exhibit?
So yeah, the previous photographs would be called overalls. This would be what we would call a close-up. And at this close-up photography, you can see the stain right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did say 350. And are you able to see any characteristics of it once you get it enhanced in terms of its size?
Yeah, you can kind of tell that it's a reddish-brown stain on that photograph.
Okay. And is there a shape or anything else to it that was of any significance to you at any point?
It was more like it was a shape that maybe round, circular, more like something that you see that would be like a splash or a spray.
So you can go back to your seat, thank you, and you can use our normal microphone. Thank you very much. So are you the person? Are you the person then who took the swab, or is Ms. Avila the person who did that?
Julie was the one that actually collected the swab, and then she packaged it up and sealed it.
Okay, and then at that point, ultimately, you've seen it in person, correct?
Correct.
You've seen it in context. You know where it's located. You know its characteristics by being able to look at it, and even enhanced, right?
Correct.
Okay, and now you are going to do an analysis of it, I assume?
That's correct.
Okay, using the usual machinery and methods as best you can, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So you have told us previously on other samples that you did a chemical test for blood in multiple other samples. You recall that in your testimony?
Yes, I do.
Did you do that as to A1?
No, I did not.
Okay, so why? Why didn't you, if you thought this might be blood, why didn't you do it on this sample?
This sample was so small. I'm like a pinhead size. So again, I just wanted to use every amount that we had available for testing, for the genetic testing.
I'm going to go back for a second to number 311, Exhibit 1, 311. Did you, and I know you weren't the primary person, but did you overall take a look at this vehicle in terms of the back of it?
Yeah, I did. I looked around the vehicle, I looked inside the vehicle, and I looked in the back of it.
And do you see the whitish or discoloring stains that are located in some of the carpet that's above the cutoff portion of the carpet?
Yes.
And did that appear to be caused by a substance that there was an odor of in the vehicle, if you know?
I didn't smell it, but I recall analyst Avila telling me that it smelled.
Now, would you expect a person to clean a carpeting using a bleach?
Objection. That's an objectable. That's an objection there. That's a speculative question. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm a little curious now. I didn't see this live, and so the pinhead spot, did that DNA match the victim?
We will get there.
Okay.
We will get there.
Well, come on, you're keeping a guy in suspense here, because
Yeah.
I'll give you a problem with this. All right, here's a problem that comes out. Let's assume the lab collected this and it was a match with the victim, because that's what we're looking for here, right? This is blood of the victim in the van. That's damning evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would expect that a sample of that small size was probably destroyed in the testing process. So there's a right of confrontation problem. Now, I don't know how if the sample was destroyed and could not be retested and double checked, then you've got a problem with confrontation. There's a secondary problem, and that is that, and I'm not looking at the chats because they're probably going to answer it here. I'll look at it when I get done. It'll distract me. The secondary problem of cross-contamination. To me, I mean, I've seen some scenes of people getting beat with bats and disposable bodies, right? And that tiny pinprick of blood is not consistent with my understanding of crime scenes. Now, they're saying, well, he attempted to clean it up with Clorox bleach or something like that, right? But that's right in the middle of the plastic. So if you're going to get anything, you're going to get that. Right. I mean, it seems to me that for that to be the only blood in a small pinprick doesn't seem consistent with either a body being transported or Or so to me, this is the one, my instinct, and this is, as a defense attorney, I'm taking the side of the defense, obviously, but it's more consistent with a cross-contamination. If it is blood, how secure was this van? How much? I would really scrutinize the log sheets to see if there was anybody in the home who had also contact with the van, because that's the type of thing where a police officer could open. He's just been in the crime scene, seen the murder. He goes there and then touches the van, and that could be if it. Now I'm going to look. Was it? Sorry,
Yeah.
It's not blood. They're saying it's not blood.
The sample was too small to test for both blood and DNA, so they chose to try to test it for DNA. There will be testimony here, which is really interesting.
Okay, well, why is that? Why is that even admissible? So what? You see, here's another problem, and that is you have mischaracterization of testimony. And I don't know what the closing arguments is, but if I know my dirty prosecutors, they will focus on these things which are lack of evidence. If it was not blood, then why are they focusing on it like this? To me, it is, and so it's basically a misrepresentation of fact. If he gets in front of the jury and say, look, here we have this spot. What do you think that is? Right? If they're saying, and they're telling me that this is not blood, cannot confirm blood, well, then that's a big problem. So you have prosecutorial misconduct of misrepresenting facts. And in fact, look here, there's a book about this. I wrote an article on this on my book, Ideas and Answers in Law, which is available only at stevegosney.com, right? There's a chapter on here on prosecutorial misconduct. And this is Florida law. I get it, but I'm sure there's an analogous law in other jurisdictions. And in that prosecutorial misconduct chapter, one of the things is misrepresenting law, but also misrepresenting fact. So, and to me, it could even be a misrepresentation by, it's like, okay, well, he didn't actually say it was blood. He just said, you got to ask yourself about this thing. But see, that is in fact affirming that has evidentiary value. If it's not blood, it's not DNA match, it has zero evidentiary value. So think about it. Think about this for a second. Everybody who has a car has a spot in their car, right? Yeah. Everybody. And so you're a suspect, and the police come in there and they say now, and they spend 2 hours talking about the spot in your car that doesn't relate to anything. Well, that is a false characterization of evidence. Now I'm jumping ahead here. I'm leaving the chat, and I've been telling. Go ahead, keep going. How long is this? Does this keep going, or how does she get to the point? Are we going to see the DNA person here? Now I got me curious to see. I don't watch these things because this is what I do for a living, and then I want to see the whole thing, and I want to start digging through it.
Would you expect someone to clean something like an auto carpet with bleach?
Not really, unless they were trying to remove something.
Okay, so does bleach provide some advantage you're aware of if somebody does not want DNA to be detected in particular locations? Are you aware of the properties of bleach in your work that would make it the right item to use for cleaning a carpet if you want to make sure there's no DNA in certain locations?
Yeah, but what time out. He's saying that bleach is not the thing to use to clean carpet, but this is not carpet. I have Clorox wipes in my car, and I use them in the dashboard of dust because I'm such a picky detail person. See, I'm really quite annoying in person. And one of the things I can't stand, like when the dust collects on my dashboard. So I have a little Clorox thing that's handy wipes, and I wipe my dash occasionally when I'm at the stoplight and it's annoying me. Then I pull that out. So the Clorox wipes are consistent with cleaning your car. So the fact that you clean your car is evidence of guilt. Most people clean their cars. Most people have a spot in their car. I want to see blood matching evidence in that van.
You're breaking up a bit, Steve.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Steve, you're breaking up a bit.
I can hear
no
you.
Worries. But
just go ahead. You play it on that. You play your side.
SAC works. SAC works in destruction, in construction, and removal of debris from houses after when they do renovations. That's what he uses that car for. And when he had custody of the kids, he drove around them with it. He put the seats back in and then drove around. So would it be mysterious spots of stuff? Yeah, but let's go on.
Why someone would use bleach to clean?
There are specific properties she's aware of.
Restructure your question.
What if any properties are there in bleach that disguise what otherwise would be DNA at a location?
So bleach removes stains and it also destroys.
Oh, is
DNA.
it me?
also-
Maybe you're just breaking up at my.
It also destroys DNA.
Thank you.
So you're aware of other items people use to clean carpets, right, that are not bleach?
That is correct, yes.
And are those items that also destroy DNA, or is bleach the particular agent that destroys DNA?
They may destroy DNA, but in our laboratory, what we use to clean down, get rid of DNA, so we don't have contamination, is a 20% solution of bleach and water to wipe down our benches and our equipment.
So this is the item of choice of the crime lab to remove DNA. Is that right?
It is, unless some of the instrumentations bleach does corrode, so that we don't use it on our instruments. But yes, on our bench tops, most definitely.
Okay, so you didn't do the chemical testing of A1 because you didn't have enough.
That's correct,
All right.
yes.
But did you do DNA testing to find out if it was going to be one of those sources of DNA you talked about, hair, semen, saliva, all those things?
Yes, I ran through the typical process that I run all the other items through, yes.
Just like all the other items we talked about in this case.
Yes, I did.
Okay, and as to A1, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 109, 109, and ask you if, based on the packaging, you are able to tell that this is in fact the item that you did DNA testing on in regards to that item that we've shown you.
Yes, it is.
And what, if any, result did you get for A1 in terms of a DNA profile?
It was a single source male profile.
And whose DNA was that a match for, if any? What person was it a match for?
Rosalio Gutierrez.
Now,
What-
you don't
what
know who
was said
minivan this
there?
is, correct?
What was the match?
Single source that she claims matched Rosalio Gutierrez,
Is that the
the,
victim?
the victim.
Where was that? What match to the victim?
The DNA,
DNA
according to
from
her.
what? From what?
From the swab of, they chose between testing it for blood and for DNA, that pin prick.
And that matched the victim?
Let's continue. Let's just,
Okay, but wait a second now. Okay, let's compare and contrast though.
Mhm.
That kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay, and see, this is I'm a little concerned because, and I didn't watch this trial, and I was busy. I've got a real job. I do this otherwise, right? But see, there was no predicates on this, and the match came out of nowhere. There was no, you remember the other way, so like this predicate, they didn't set them up and everything. This person isn't a DNA lab person, are they? And they didn't say what was the percentages and the alleles and right. I mean, you would say 1 in quintillion. She just said it was a match, and she just threw that out there. Was there a basis for that?
let's find out if she says anything more.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I'm
At
jumping
any given
in.
time.
Yeah, I didn't take the van in. It was not my primary duty, so I don't think I looked at any of the paperwork.
And you as an analyst are not focused on any particular suspect. You have no one in mind to figure out, who's who in terms of the DNA determinations, do you?
No.
Now, are you able to give this jury an opinion as to whether the substance you tested for DNA in the stain or the pinhead you mentioned, whether that, are you able to form an opinion as to what the source of DNA is? In other words, when we talk about semen, skin, all those things, do you have an opinion for the jury regarding which of the...
That was it. That was the entirety
Wait.
of her conclusion.
He didn't answer. He's asking a question. You stopped it. He says, Do you have an opinion? What was the opinion? What does he
Various
say?
sources that DNA comes from.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what is your opinion as to what the source of the DNA A1 is?
Based on my education, training, and experience, given the color and the way that the stain looked, I would say that it would be blood.
And are you able to indicate that? You're able to indicate that by appearance. Is there something about the results that you had that also allows you to assist in that conclusion?
Yes, the type of genetic testing we do and the locations we look at are human specific.
So this is human. This is the DNA of that is human DNA, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So let's do this. So are you able to do essentially a process of elimination as part of your analysis?
Yes, that's part of our analysis.
Okay. Did this, based on your conclusions and the results, was this human hair?
No, it was not.
Was it saliva?
No, it was not.
Was it semen?
No.
Was it skin cells that were simply skin cells without being another source?
Yeah, there may have been skin cells, but I couldn't say that for sure because you really can't see that. So I would say probably not skin cells.
So your opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, is that this is the blood of Rosalio Gutierrez. Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair.
Oh, what, stop. For what basis is this? This is ridiculous. What is the basis for her conclusion? You can't just, I mean, that's just like, well, it's based, what is it? It's just my opinion, man. Like the dude, that's what that is. I mean, I don't get it. So how is she, what is the basis of her opinion on that? I don't get that.
Experience, she also,
But
based
to be
on her
look,
experience
DNA
and
is
training,
science.
yeah,
You've
yeah.
got to have a basis for your opinion. Otherwise, it's just an opinion, man.
Yeah.
And now, I really do have a concern about cross-contamination here. Assume that this is actually blood of the victim. I would really scrutinize the logs because the way it's very odd. I will say, let's compare and contrast this examination with the one we just did. The one the previous one was done right. Remember, I said these are all predicate questions. It's done out of the National District Attorney Association's predicate question book. There's a book, I got it in my office, about predicate questions. That's the way you do DNA. This guy completely didn't do any of that. And then he says, okay, he kind of comes at it, he's like winging it. And then he says, now that pinprick, it's a match, right? And then he says, what's your opinion of this? Oh, I think it's blood. What's the basis for that opinion? I don't know. Was there an objection or a limiting ruling on this from the defense? I don't know. I didn't watch this. And they also say I pulled ideas and answers in 233, page 233.
Yeah. Let's see. I will pick this from either I can pick this from memory or I can send Solomon a link because
Solomon.
Solomon Anderson. That's Zachariah Anderson's brother, who is in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not. I don't know this case. I don't know what all. I'm just reacting to this prosecutor, and and under page 233, a lawyer must not fabricate evidence. The National District Attorney Association addressed this issue directly. That's the prosecutor's professional organization. A prosecutor shall not knowingly make a false statement of fact or law to the court. Misstatements of facts in evidence can be reversible error, and it's 583.5. And there's a whole list of cases. In fact, I recognize a few of these that I was involved in. Oh my God, an appeal, the Crew case specifically, and maybe that one. But there's a whole list. This is Florida cases, of course. But I think the same thing applies, and that is that because you're not following the National District Attorney Association predicate questions, which is not, it's optional, right? It's not required, but it's the easy. Why not do it the right way, right? You got it sitting right there. You follow the right. And this guy's the elected official, so do it right. He didn't do that. So he's kind of winging it. He's trying to paint a picture of guilt, which is he's an advocate for guilt rather than being an advocate for the truth. So he's not following the questions. Then he asks is it a match, which is not properly predicated based on the predicate questions? You know, that's not the answer. Is not as it's. He should have followed up with it's 1 in quintillion, or like the other one did, right? Should have been set up. Who are you? What's the process? What's the thing? How did you analyze it? You should have gone through all of that. And then she throws out this match, and then he says all of these other things. Well, it can't be this, can't be this. Well, how do you know that? What test? Was there a scientific test? No, she's just opining. It's just an opinion. Well, I got an opinion. You got an opinion. The chat's got an opinion. The family, you guys said there's a family member. I'm sure they don't think it is. So why is her opinion any better than anybody else's? Because she has a degree and she's getting paid for by the state. So isn't that fabricating? You're creating evidence. You're forcing evidence to fit a narrative. Like I said, if you've got everybody's got a spot in their car. So we all are transporting bodies in our van. And then you've got the issue of cross-contamination. And a spot like this is very suspect, because if he's really, first of all, that area, if he's wiping things down to clean it up, that spot would have been cleaned. The blood would have been found in much harder to wipe areas. It wouldn't be found on a flat surface where you're wiping, right? So I don't know. I'm skeptical here. All of these things raise my. I can get it. I see people are upset about this case. And just this little snippet. I don't like the prosecutor, so maybe I'm biased, but I'm just asking.
But wait, it gets worse.
Oh, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thakura Anderson's DNA is nowhere to be found in the victim's apartment. There is no trace of him being there.
Wait. Well, that's for the murder scene, though, right?
Yeah, the murder scene.
Like the murder scene.
There's no trace of him there.
Did they test and see, that's what takes good police work, because good police work, you would examine the scene. Well, see, there's no body, but you would still, there would be, they would, oh God, I mean, I can't reveal some things. I have some cases that I could give you some real positive examples of good police work. And I can't talk about them for attorney-client reasons. But I will say that police work, good police work, will locate DNA. Yeah, they know, they can look and they can see. I mean, you can analyze a crime scene or alleged crime scene and determine different like come up with a theory of the case and project where DNA might be found. Like, for instance, a doorknob. Yeah,
light switches.
Light switches. Exit
inside doorknobs.
If the theory is that the body was taken out in a carpet and rolled up in a carpet, I assume that the carpet was in the house. So there would be a lot of, places where he might have brushed against. Like, there would be blood within the house where the body was transported. Even if it was rolled up and there weren't drag marks, there would be traces of blood. Like, assume he cleaned the van. There would be swipes of blood within the house on door frames where he's transporting the body, because if he's actually carrying a 270-pound body and throwing it in his van, there would be blood swipes within the house that he exits and leaves and does not clean up, right? So there would be blood trails. There would be evidence of a bat and knife murder. So I'm just saying that this is inconsistent with and so the police work should have been directed towards the vet. Now, I didn't watch the trial, so I don't know how good the police work was or was not. But to me, this is a problem. This is why we have a beyond a reasonable doubt standard, and the burden is on the state, because the state is in control of the crime scene. And therefore, once you screw up the crime scene and the police work, the defense can't go back and recreate it. It's a real problem. And that's why the jurors need to be. I'm sorry, you're getting me going here. Go finish up.
It gets worse.
Okay.
It gets worse.
All right.
They found about a week after they released the crime scene, they found the victim's wallet. No, the phone and credit cards in the freezer.
In the freezer? A week later?
A week after they released the crime scene.
What? No. Oh, that's terrible. Bad crime scene.
By the victim's mother, I believe. So they get there. They discover there's a smudge on the credit card. They do not test. They don't test it.
Oh, no. Jeez.
They take the phone. they don't swab it or anything for prints, anything. There are, and
what's the theory? Wait a second. His wallet and credit cards were in the freezer. Why would the wallet and the credit cards be in the freezer?
I have an alternate than the prosecution. An alternate
Well, what's
theory.
the motive of Anderson to kill this guy?
The victim had a relationship with Zachariah's ex-girlfriend.
Okay,
So they claim it's a crime of jealousy, passion, sort of that.
Well, to me, the location of the wallet and credit card is exculpatory. That is, at least it's not consistent with the theory that the state is pursuing, that it was a fit of jealousy, right? Or a rage killing. A rage killing, why would a rage killer remove the wallet and put it in the freezer? We're assuming that the murderer did that, right? I mean, why would you keep your wallet in the freezer? That's an odd thing. Why? What is the alternative? There's got to be an alternative theory. Because
there is an alternative theory that because the victim, besides having a relationship with Zach's ex-girlfriend, he was pursuing other women.
He was what?
He was pursuing other. He was a serial cheater.
Okay, but so what? How does the wallet end up in the freezer?
He also owed everybody money, including possible criminal elements that wasn't allowed into the through a they tried to get it in via a Denny motion, but it was denied.
Yeah, okay. This was the part that they were asking me about that I remember. Yeah. It's something unique. What's the jurisdiction? Is Wisconsin?
Wisconsin.
Yeah, this Denny motion I am not familiar with at all, because when I heard that, first of all, to me, there's a constitutional right to present a defense.
Yeah, okay, the credit cards and the phone was in the freezer, not the wallet, sorry. But, yeah.
Credit cards and phone? Yeah, see, that's consistent with... That to me seems more like almost a financial motive or some sort of... It's not consistent with a jealousy or rage killing. It's more consistent with... Because messing with somebody's phone, or why would they put a credit card in your phone? That's an odd bit of evidence. But if you're angry and you murder somebody out of anger because of jealousy, and then you dispose the body, why would you ever remove credit cards and a phone and put them in a freezer? That's just an odd bit of... Well, first of all, usually you would take the phone with you. I don't know. I don't know all the facts in the case, obviously, so I'm just talking. You got me. People always asking me about this case, and I didn't watch it, so I'm like, I'm reacting.
Yeah, they are screaming at me to get Solomon on so he can, because I made a few factual...
Is Solomon the relative?
Yeah, he's the older brother of Zachariah. So I'm sending him.
I think I might see. Everybody's asking me about this case. I think it may be because people feel it's a wrongful conviction, which I know that people have been pounding the pavement saying it's a wrongful conviction. And Gosney, why didn't you watch that? Because I got another job. I got other cases at work. And I think I was on with the sister once with somebody, and there was a lot of people that were very upset by the story.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, you bring them on. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you, it's your show, man. I'm just hanging.
Yeah. I sent, but also, wait, it gets worse.
Okay.
Yeah. On the crime scene, they found a beer bottle and a water bottle. They swapped both, but only tested one.
Which one? Why is that?
The beer bottle.
Well, why didn't they test the water bottle? Well, so, I mean, that's something that collateral counsel needs to do, is get that bottle checked for DNA. Of course, I don't know how age time affects that. That would be up to a DNA expert to tell me that. But see, this is bad. See, bad police work can be very difficult. I mean, it's because it's hard. Oh, gosh. See, this is why I don't watch these. I just deal with my cases, because I have such pain. One of the most painful cases that I've ever dealt with
Or is it me that is echoing?
It's what?
Am I echoing?
Oh, it's probably
Or is-
me. You want to put the headphones on? I'll put them on. But
It might be my voice echoing in your feed.
yeah, I'll turn it down a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So no, here's the thing that I had a very painful case, and it was a cop who processed the crime scene, excluded our client from the crime scene. She was at the crime scene, and he retired like 6 months later, and he was done, right? And so, and then 2.5 years later, they came back and arrested our client. And because of the garbage job that was done on the side of the road by the cop who didn't document that she had been excluded, they were then able to construct a case of guilt when she was actually innocent. It's the hardest case of my career. I was actually second chair, and it was horrible. Prosecutorial misconduct, constructing guilt, hiding evidence. And I don't even like talking about it. First of all, it would take me all night. And second is it's over and done. But representing somebody who's actually innocent is the most difficult thing. But I know I can see why people are upset, at least with this DNA evidence, because that was not done properly, I don't think. And I got a lot of questions. I think I got a lot of questions about how they got to that conclusion. And that's because there weren't proper predicates laid. And how was she allowed to testify like that? How is she raising this conclusion? And I want to look at see, here's what happens. When a good police work would be, they would isolate that van. They would not allow anybody coming onto the crime scene to ever go near the van, right? When was the van recovered?
We can have a better source than me here. Chat, you know him, you love him. Hi. Oh,
hello. Oh,
hi.
baby, you there? Well, I'll tell you one thing. This guy's family, family, has got a lot of good family sticking by him, and very few of my clients have that. So he's blessed that he has family that is loving him and looking after him and fighting for him, even after this horrible conviction. Sorry, I didn't watch the trial in completion. I watched a little bit of it, enough to remember that. Oops. But anyway, Solomon, nice to meet you. I'm Steve.
Hey, Steve. Yeah, we exchanged a couple of emails a while back. I know that you weren't covering the trial, but I got the privilege of baby duty while listening to the podcast tonight.
Awesome.
So yeah, sorry, I was yelling at you from the chat, specifically about a number of things.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Lay it into me. Go for it.
That Nicholas had already corrected was that they had found the phone and the credit cards, but the wallet was actually photographed laying on the couch. So the wallet was open, laying on the couch on a cushion adjacent to what would appear to be a blood stain on one of the rear cushions, like one of the vertical cushions in the back of the couch. And I mean, speculatively, it looked like the indent from somebody's head was there, right? Wallets laying on the couch, phone and credit cards removed from the wallet and put in the freezer. So it was an odd crime scene for an act of passion. Furthermore, the carpet that was missing from the middle of the room had the furniture neatly moved off of it. So, I mean, it's possible that Gutierrez moved the two small coffee tables off to the side. But the reality was that they actually found blood splatter behind the coffee tables, behind the small tables, on the wall and curtains. So that implied that the tables weren't there during the act of violence, and that the tables were moved neatly off to the side. It didn't make sense to fit the narrative that the state had pressed, because in an act of passion, you're not giving, you don't care about the furniture as you're bludgeoning a man to death. So there were a bunch of things that didn't add up on the crime scene specifically.
I mean, how, and I mean, you are obviously following the case and care about it deeply.
Right.
And was there a major problem with the crime scene analysis and investigation? Is this part of the problem?
Huge. huge. It's tremendous, actually. Is that they did such a mediocre job processing evidence. I didn't even swab underneath my brother's fingernails, right? So they didn't.
How quickly was he arrested after the incident?
Yeah, he was arrested 2 days later.
Okay.
So 2 days
and
after
the van was
medical-
recovered 2 days.
Yeah, so he was arrested on the evening of the 19th when the crime scene, they say that the crime occurred on the evening of the 17th, when they claim that the phone was put in the freezer based on the phone's activity record, because it stopped responding after a portrait shift at about 10:44 p.m. I believe was the last occurrence that the phone had on the night of the 17th. So there's.
Well, here's one of the questions. So there's a lot of questions, and you're intimately involved, and I'm just here to, you can educate me, okay? Yeah, and see the problem here. I'm going back to the burden of proof, because see, once a crime scene is not processed correctly, once they don't do their job, now you in the defense chair are almost, you're trying to prove innocence, and it's impossible. It's not possible for you to go back and recreate the crime scene or to analyze the crime scene or do any of these things. And so, so when the prosecutor is making these little leaps, assumptions, and advocating for guilt, and it's allowed, the defense is powerless to stop it, because now they're kind of shifting the burden to you. It's like when they're trying with these speculations that are being made by this prosecutor, which, obviously we just saw some of that. How do you defend against it when the crime scene was in their control?
So there was a few issues that occurred even during the trial. One being that specifically, Michael Gravely attempted to shift the burden of proof onto the defense, and the judge allowed it.
Well, see, that's an appellate issue. That's a very good appellate. You have appellate counsel?
Not anyone that's secured as of yet. My brother is still weighing options and whether he wants to spend $200,000 on an appellate attorney.
Well, is he qualified for the public defender's office?
We'll see. He's got to see if he'll qualify for it at all.
Has he been sentenced?
May 16th.
Okay. So once the sentencing occurs, you'll have a period of time in which to file a notice of appeal. Ask for the public defender's office. That's where you start, and see what they say. So, and educate them. And, educate them, make a list of issues that you think and provide it to the appellate attorney. Communicate with the appellate attorney. Give them the issues. Give it to them on a silver platter. Obviously, you've got a lot of law tube minds working on this and have identified a lot of issues for you. So have him say, I'm indigent. Obviously, he's probably lost everything in this deal.
Yeah.
And, get the public defender. And of course, if the public defender does a brief, you'll be able to criticize it. And then, of course, you can I'm giving you a tip. This is a terrible tip. It's horrible that I'm going to tell you this, but your family is well respected amongst a lot of people that I respect. So I'll tell you this against my own interest. Anybody, my boss looking around here? What you can do, get the public defender. The public defender will give you an appellate brief, summarize the facts, identify issues of law. Then you can take that appellate brief and hire your own lawyer, and then add the issues that you feel also that were left out if he doesn't do a job that you feel is proper. So that way you get double duty. You get a one attorney who will do a once through with the appeal. And then once you get it, if the issues weren't raised properly, you're not comfortable with that attorney's progress, then you hire appellate counsel and have them make a notice of appearance. You got to be ready to go when that brief gets filed, but then have them appear and then withdraw that brief and file your own. I'm throwing my own. We hate that when that happens. Well, I shouldn't say we hate it. We don't really care. But the thing is like what happens a lot of times is I'll do a brief. This happens to me when I'm doing. So I get a case and I do a brief, right? And I lay it all out and then do all the work and then file the brief. And then the private counsel comes in and basically takes my brief and then adds the stupid issue. Usually it's a stupid issue, I think, of course, and then they collect the money and they get paid for my work. But really, I don't care because the state of Florida pays me and I'm happy as can be. But that way you get 2 eyes for the price of 1. How about that for a tip?
That's a good tip to have. Yeah. In this case, I think that no matter what attorney is going to look at it, they'll be a little upset if we make them dig through the discovery like that. It's
tough though, because people look at this. It's not a new trial. It's a review of the facts. It's a review of the law that was applied. Appellate work is a whole different beast. It's a hard one to I don't know. And in the public defender's office, there's great attorneys and there's mediocre attorneys, just like there are great private attorneys and mediocre. It's not, your value of your attorney is not necessarily determined by the amount of money you pay them.
Right.
So I don't know. I think maybe I did. I think I did. I'm trying to remember the email that you asked. I might have given you some of these tips previously, at least on the chat. What did I tell you? Now that
you said that you would look in to see who you might know in the state of Wisconsin that would be highly qualified to help us out, and because I had asked you a little bit about it, and you said, well, I'm not, I'm not. I was licensed in the state of Wisconsin, So you respectfully bowed out, and we had a brief exchange, and you kind of wished me luck. But realistically, we had a district attorney attempt to violate 2 of my brother's constitutional rights during the trial. He specifically addressed the judge and asked permission to get as close to the line as possible in referencing my brother's right to silence, as well as attempting to shift the burden of proof onto him, to the point where my brother's defense attorneys needed to make a statement about how they couldn't test evidence, and they weren't allowed onto the crime scene to process the crime scene independently, because he had blatantly said that well, the defense can test everything as well. Like, the defense can test all of the evidence, and it was a huge problem.
Yeah, burden shifting is a big problem, and that is something that's I've addressed in prosecutorial misconduct. There's so many issues. Obviously, I hear this was a long trial, and it sounds to me like there's a lot of issues. And you've got this guy. This guy is the elected prosecutor, which is a pain in the rear. I don't know the politics up there either, and what you're dealing with politically wise, but I don't know. I'm sorry your family's dealing with this. And I will say that one thing your brother is blessed is he's obviously got, I know you, your brother, and a sister, and it sounds to me like a very supportive family. And that is, we're lawyers and we get the case, and then the next case comes and it's like, okay, but there's only you're the person that's outside who can give that person support and love. And people can feel abandoned. I mean, I've got so many clients that nobody writes them. No, they've just been thrown away, and they don't have family, and they don't have people. And look, you got a little baby and an extended family and people that care. And obviously, I mean, this case, it's amazing. Every time I turn, everybody asks me about the Anderson case, and I'm like, I didn't watch it. and I'm not a Wisconsin lawyer. I try to bring it in, but.
So the Wisconsin versus Denny, I believe the year that it was settled was 1984. So Wisconsin versus Denny in 1984 specifically outlined the means at which to point the finger at a potential other culprit for a crime. So if you're accused of a crime, you have to fulfill 3 things in order to point the finger. You have to prove motive, opportunity, and means to commit the crime of someone else that you're going to bring as a potential other actor into the trial to present to the jury, and that was the Denny objection early on, and that was what was discussed.
See, that strikes me as, I'm a Florida lawyer, not a Wisconsin lawyer, but that strikes me as a violation of your right to fair trial, right to present a defense. So there's federal issues. So one thing the appellate attorney needs to do is federalize this, because that is a state law, state case, And that doesn't seem to me to comport. If I was in Florida and that rule exists, I would challenge that under federal right to present a fair trial. But it sounds to me like you got a whole lot of issues. And one of the problems of the case like that, and this is typical, when it rains, it pours. When they screw up one thing, usually it's everything that's screwed up. And then you've got 10, 20 issues, and you have to figure out which are your best issues, which are the ones that are most likely to get you relief, which ones that are most supported by law. So fighting for a change in the law may be great, but the chances of getting that are very low. And so you're probably better off sticking with more legal issues. This is the kind of analysis and the kind of thoughts that you have to do and choices you have to make in appeals. I remember one case, I still think about it because I maybe should have left off 2 extra points. I had a 6-point merit brief. I think the first 4 were all just killer points. It still bothers me to this day. It should have been written on. This is welcome to my appellate world. But I added 2 points, and I'm like, I argued them because it would have had a good remedy, and they were iffy. But I'm like, I always think, should I have taken those out because did it detract to my better 4 points? And those are the kind of choices you have to make. There's different philosophies of that. Only go with your strong points. But here it sounds to me like you've got multiple strong points, which is good for an appeal. But winnowing out those or making those kind of choices takes a good lawyer and takes somebody who knows the court, knows your appellate system, and can weigh those probabilities. I'm not familiar at all with Wisconsin's politics or judiciary or any of that. So that's why I can't advise you on these type of things. I can give you hints and tips, federalize.
Yeah.
You know.
So in your experience, how often has a prosecutor made themselves a witness in the case and then refused to recuse themselves and then continued to prosecute the case, and then the judge also refused to remove them?
Well, let me ask you this. And how did they make themselves a witness?
So when they were doing reviews of what witnesses were going to testify to, so testimony reviews, not coaching, right? Just reviewing testimony. He went out of his way to meet a witness at the alleged crime scene or at the crime scene to test where she had parked her car, so he would have a more clear understanding of her testimony, as opposed to just going over the information that she had testified to in the police report, and then got her to change her testimony and submit that to the court. So he personally.
Wait. The first part's okay. Tell me about changing her testimony. How did that happen? What was the change?
So then she testified, because she had originally testified to the fact that she was sitting outside the building and saw, I think, a larger black woman go upstairs and come outside or something like that, but never saw anyone else enter or leave the building. After she met with Gravely and he drove with her over to the apartment building, the apartment complex, he then testified that she went to the wrong building and then inserted himself as a witness to her driving to the wrong location, which was 2 years later, or just shy of 2 years after the incident.
I don't understand the change in testimony. I will put it this way. It would be proper for a prosecutor and investigator's office to get with a witness pre-testimony and go through their testimony, even going enough to go to the crime scene and view the crime scene, okay? And so that you better understand what the witness is saying. That's okay.
Mm.
When there's a change of testimony, you're saying there was a change of testimony as to a witness, like they saw somebody leaving the building. I don't understand how that testimony can be changed based on location visit.
So she had originally given a statement saying that she was outside the building, and then totally redacted the statement or redacted the fact that she was outside the correct building, and that she couldn't have seen into the building based on her interaction with Michael Gravely in that testimony review.
Yeah,
And okay, this is a complicated issue, and I don't know. I will say that a lot of this is lawyer speak. It depends. it's that doesn't sound to me like something that would change over time, except through either coercion by the prosecutor or bad memories being changed through time. Because why would your memory change? It's a strange thing there. I don't know. I'd need to know more about it.
Yeah. She drove there on the night of the alleged killing.
So she was there, and she's supposedly a witness, and then he took her, and then she changed, so she's no longer an exculpatory witness. She changed her testimony to not help, so that so he found a pro-defense witness and inoculated them by, okay. Yeah, that's true. That's a little tricky. I don't know. I'd have to really dissect that one. I'm sorry. I don't. I mean, I'd like to just tell you, oh yes, you're all right and everything, but I don't know. I'd have to really look at that one.
In the trial,
it sounds fishy to me.
Yeah. In the trial,
but I will say that I've argued this issue in court. I've argued in appeals court. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nick. It's your show.
In the trial. Greatly was not allowed to be in the courtroom when that witness testified, because he potentially could be called as a witness by the defense.
The prosecutor? Well, he should have been disqualified.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like sort of being pregnant. You're either a witness or you're not.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's odd.
Yeah.
Yep. And the jail snitch that you had mentioned, which is, just a fluff witness that didn't have any real merit. He met without any recording device, so they never recorded an interview with the jail snitch when the jail snitch gave the story to the prosecutor and the ADA, and they said that I think Correa had attended that as well. So the three people sitting on the prosecutor's bench went and met with Marquand Washington, also known as Munch, and they specifically had crafted this story that then Michael Gravely was mouthing along die to from the bench at the same time as Marquand on the stand.
Yeah.
Well,
so there was no recording because Gravely does not record when he meets with potential witnesses.
Well, that's exactly the issue that I had in my appeal, and and this, sadly, I'm saying it's sad, but this is not uncommon. And this is one of the people get upset with me because I rant and rave at prosecutors. I've seen this before. It's when they take on the idea they're an advocate for guilt. I had a case where it was a child sex victim who was being coached by the prosecutor. And what they did is they changed there's a 3 witness interview rule in Florida. So you can only interview a child victim 3 times because they're subject to changing their memories and what happened was this prosecutor hotboxed the witness, the victim in the case, and they changed their testimony 180 degrees after the prosecutor, just before trial, after the prosecutor met with them to make it much worse client. And then of course, as a defense attorney, how do I the question is why did this child person change their testimony? Well, it wasn't recorded, and the only witness to the changed testimony was the prosecutor. So the defense attorney says, I want to call the prosecutor as a witness, and the judge wouldn't allow it. And so how do you ever discover why? You asked, the kid was tiny, it was like, I think it was a 6-year-old. They don't know. So when you ask, well, how did this witness testimony change radically just before the trial after this meeting when the only people that present was the prosecutor's office? It seems to me they're making themselves a witness. You should record those interviews, right? So this is similar to what you're saying, but and I had that on appeal.
We have a parallel here because Zach's daughter was also a witness. She was 10 or 12 when this alleged crime happened. She was now 14.
12.
Now 3 years later. Yeah.
She's now 15. Yeah.
15. And based on what I could tell from what was presented in trial through cross and other things, that more or less every time she was interviewed by either a cop or the prosecutor, her story changed a bit. Now this was transcribed, but then she had a meeting with the prosecutor about a month before trial, between trials, because this was a mistrial in the retrial. It was a mistrial from 2 years ago, because the prosecutor didn't disclose that that one witness had changed the story.
Well, and there's disclosure is another issue, and of course laws are different in different states. This is why it's hard for me to opine on if it was right or wrong given the context. But everything that's being said smells to me like it's a problematic prosecution. The prosecutor wants to get a conviction for some reason. Now, is it just? I mean, why is? But it's. I don't know why prosecutors do this except arrogance and power, and that their need to convict and is so great that they want to win at all costs, and there's no check on their power. And that's kind of, so there's that. It's always that base human instinct, which it doesn't quite compute with me. I recognize that that's the reality, but it annoys me because it's not where I come from. Kind of, it's not what I've been taught. It's not what I believe, and so it rubs against me. But I think that is the bare reality. But also, I'll just ask you this up front, Solomon, is that is there some other political motive why he would want to create this case? Was it like a big media case that needed solving, and he's going to solve the case? Or
I mean, they had pushed it into the media specifically. His PR person had actually told a bunch of lies to the public, up to and including the fact that there was Mr. Gutierrez's blood in my brother's van, that they had found Mr. Gutierrez's clothes in my brother's fire pit, and a bunch of other things that were just demonstrably false, just completely fabricated. So he had spun a massive string of lies. Gutierrez was closely connected to the court system. So
Gutierrez was the victim.
The alleged victim. So Gutierrez had a close connection. He worked as, I believe, a court servicer, and when Bruce Schrader had hurt himself, they had to push the trial date. So Zach's lawyers had filed a habeas corpus. So the Chief Justice of the Second District Court had to oversee the interim while Schrader was recovering, and he said that he personally had to recuse himself of making decisions on the case, and that there was one judge that wasn't available for like 2 to 3 years that was not personally connected to Mr. Gutierrez, and every other judge could not sit on his case at all. And then he continued to refuse to kick it out of the district. So he refused to relocate the case, and refused the right to habeas corpus to speedy trial. And then they had a bunch of last minute panic hearings between the then recovering and injured Bruce Schrader, Michael Gravely, the Chief Justice, and then they made a quick plan to try and interrupt the right to speedy trial, and then squeeze it in the end of February, which is when.
Well, I have strong opinions about the speedy trial rule, which is, it's basically a useless thing, and so many of our constitutional rights have been eroded by time, and it's sad to say that. And I'm going to tell you this, as harsh as this sounds, but I have to talk to families like you all the time and tell them not only is the chances of appeal difficult, but oftentimes, this is a terrible thing to say, but it's true, complex cases are generally losers, because it's better to have simple is better, because you have lazy judges who don't want to do it and want to rubber stamp it. Now, I will also say, though, this is my local experience, I don't know Wisconsin. Maybe it's a whole different deal, but people are the same. The other thing is that media cases tend to get written opinions. So the fact that there's so much interest in your case, obviously nationwide or worldwide, we got a Swede over here. that is good, I think, because then there is scrutiny and there is a feeling of error, and judges on appellate courts want to be popular too. So so there's that going. That's a plus. A negative is that when I'm hearing you talk, all I'm hearing is questions, and it's going to be driven by what's in the record. And this was a long trial too, wasn't it? Like 15 days or something.
It was just over 3 weeks of trial. Yeah.
3 weeks. Yeah. And see, that's tough. I mean, and that's part of it. Like, well, you saw that in the Murdoch trial. It's like, well, we don't have anything, so we're just going to talk for 3 weeks, and it'll look like something because we've talked for so long. And then what happens is it's the appellate courts look at a huge record like that, and they're like, they throw up their hands. So it's better if you have clean errors, simple errors that can be stated very briefly. I've done a survey of the cases that I've won in appeals and the ones that I haven't won. The cases that I win generally are 2-pagers, issues that I can state in just very short and to the point. So it's and I did a survey, looked at all, because like I've got I could go on for a month on all the cases. I actually have a file that I share. We share briefs amongst and I train I just trained a new appellate attorney, and I have a little like thing that's a public, so everybody, we can share briefs. So if you have, do you have this issue? Do you have a suppression issue? And so we share briefs. I have Steve's shared briefs, and in it I have cases I've won, and I have all the cases I've won, and I throw them in there. And then I have another one that says cases I should have won. and when I read through the ones that I win are all these little short ones. And so I really work very hard to get to the point and keep it clean and keep it simple and keep it direct, because the ones that I should have won are generally the longer ones. Even though I'm right, they don't want to hear it. It's like, oh, you've got a million ways to lose. And somewhere in that 60-page brief, there's something they can argue about, and you end up losing. So this is just sort of general appellate tips. This is appellate training. This is appellate training 101, first day on the job. And that's just an observation. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's the way it should be. I just think it's kind of human nature. So,
I mean, realistically, the appellate, they continue. There's more and more stuff. They brought in other acts evidence. There was all kinds of stuff in this trial that was brought in that should never have been brought in. Like I said, there was the witness tampering. Greatly had spent, I think, I was told 40 hours, prepping my niece for testimony. Like that. It's gross.
Oh, you had a niece who was testifying negatively against. I remember. I might have seen that. I might have seen something about that.
She was threatened by the DA, fines and other things to testify. He was going to slap her with all kinds of penalties if she didn't. So like there's all kinds of problems with this whole situation, and how he polluted the entire right to a fair trial at all. He was just such a bad actor in through this whole process that
witness tampering like that, and I don't know what the relationships are again, but I got to tell you something. I did tell you. I think I told you, or maybe it was your sister. You've got a sister, right?
Yeah.
I was on with your sister. Couple things. One is that, I don't know if I should tell you this on open public forum, but
that's fine. You can tell me off air.
I'll put it in the private chat. Let me put it in the private chat. Okay, I'll put this in the private chat.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
But I can go, while you do that, I can go back to how could Mr. Gutierrez DNA, how we even can call this so-called evidence. There are, according to me, 2 ways. One is that it was transferred there by Mr. Gutierrez himself, because there is text evidence that he said that he could go over there to break Zach's legs. So there you have a possibility that the victim itself went over there and did something, and that left DNA. Number 2 is that I believe 1 or 2 of the police officers who were at the crime scene went directly to the van. So there you also have a possibility of transferring DNA evidence. But none of that were. Then you have the
cross-scene contamination. If it's a bad police work, see,
Yeah.
good police work will prevent that.
Yeah.
But bad police work will that can definitely happen, and that's a possibility. And that's a tough one to deal with, because what happens when you get this DNA evidence in there? I have another one I want to recommend to you, and I recommended this to your sister, and it's quite expensive, and I don't know. I mean, but I'm gonna give this one to everybody. Let me pull it up real quick here. I'll put it in the private chat, and you can post it. Nicholas, hold on, let me find it. I've got too many videos on my Rumble channel.
I mean, it was one of the things that you were talking about earlier, and that is with the red speck in the van. One of the problems that I had with the red speck in general is that there were stains that were of similar nature all over the van. So there was a stain that looked the same on the visor above the driver's seat, I believe on the steering wheel, on the runner next to the driver's side, the sliding door, and on the opposite wheel well on the backside of the van, opposite of that one speck. So there's other specks of a similar substance, reddish brown in nature, that all tested negative with luminol, that nothing tested positive for blood. So you have this substance that they claimed in their opinion was blood all over the van. None of it tests positive for blood. They assume that this one pinhead-sized speck is blood in their testimony. That's what
did the prosecutor in closing echo say this was blood?
Yes.
And this was the victim's blood. I got to tell you that people are yelling about no body, and I just that's a corpus delicti issue. There is circumstantial that is not. Go ahead.
The prosecutor claimed that they found the body in closing statements.
They found the body?
That's what he said in closing statements.
He misspoke in closing statements, so
Was it a
we
misspeak
found the
or was it
body.
a misrepresentation?
He misspoke and said that they discovered the body in closing statements.
Well, what I'm trying to tell people is just because there's no body doesn't mean you can't be convicted of murder. So that is pretty clear that is it's tough because it prevents the fact that you've got blood and blood splatter in the location and this sort of thing. I mean, that's consistent in the wallet being placed in the thing. All of these things to me are consistent with a murder scene. It's not conclusive, but it's consistent, right? So I don't think it's. I mean, and the argument here is identity, not that. I don't know. Maybe it's that he's not really dead, but I think the real issue here, the real defense here, is that maybe he was murdered, maybe he wasn't, but my guy didn't do it, right? So you kind of want to pick your theory, but would there be a reason that he would fake his own death?
Other than the fact that he owed a lot of people money.
A serial cheater who owed a lot of people money. Now, they claimed in trial that he only owed $60, but a witness testified he was owed money all the time. So repeatedly owed money.
See, here's something people need to understand about appeals, though, is if you have a contradiction in the testimony, the thing is that the jury can choose to believe whomever.
Yeah.
So you can't really resolve evidentiary contradictions in an appellate level. So this is a check of law and, like you're saying, burden shifting. See, that's a legal issue. If you're saying this is the wrong burden of proof. You can share that second private chat if you want. I wanted to tell you that there's one of my clients who was a very good person, I would say, and somebody who I really feel is actually innocent, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And after multiple appeals, and we exhausted the appellate process, she discovered jury misconduct and was able to get a new trial based on jury misconduct. and I'm telling you that because she has since gone on to found something called juryinvestigations.com, and she has done over 70 jury investigations where she can discover whether the jury did commit misconduct. So this is something that you ought to look at, because appellate process can be very difficult, and I'm not a big fan. I mean, I'm not a believer in. I mean, I've just been through it enough to know that I've got a whole folder of ones I should have won, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure you're exploring all your opportunities. Definitely give Mary Rose Peterson a call at Jury Investigations.
Yeah, I've spoken with her. It comes at a pretty heavy price.
This. Yeah.
So there's so I've already done that.
Okay.
And then there's some issues with the way Wisconsin actually conducts the voir dire. They don't have like written forms that they fill out or anything like that, even leading into the trial. So a lot of it is based on the interview done by the attorneys, on the days of jury selection. So there's some other issues that are a little more difficult to nail down for jury misconduct in the state of Wisconsin. It's not impossible, but it's
right.
A little.
I'm glad you talked to her. I mean, feel free to use my name, but I don't know if you did. I think I told your sister about that at the last one. But that's also an avenue of jury misconduct. I'll put it in the chat too. I'll post this. Can I post a link in your chat?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I mean, will it work? Let me see. I'll try it.
And
if people want to see that interview, I did my interview with. When I was first starting out my Rumble channel, I'm like looking for people to interview, like who's going to talk to little old me. And so, of course, one of my buddies this client that I had who was walked off of. In fact, I have a picture on my desk, or it's on my computer, and I pull it up occasionally, like whenever I'm feeling down about my life, like I suck and I never get any wins and this sort of thing. I pull up this picture of her husband walking out of the jail in his little orange paper clothes and giving her a hug. It's so beautiful. In fact, you can see the video if you go to her website, and she's got the whole story of how it happened, and it's really beautiful. And it's kind of like, this is why you work so hard, right? Because you got to after you get the door slammed in your face enough, it kind of gets discouraging. So you got to remember that there's people out there that need the help. I don't know. I don't want to. I'm sitting there talking too much. What else do you guys got for me today?
When it comes to by your experience as an appellate lawyer, if there is no DNA evidence that is not evidence in itself, but how many cases are thrown out because they find other people's unidentified source of DNA on evidence?
Well, not unidentified. Usually that's a very tough question, because this guy sounded to me like, he was always like saying, it's not this, therefore it must be this. There's a lot of logic errors in what was being done there in that little bit. But I don't know. That's a hard question. I don't know if
because Solomon can correct me if he wants, but on the credit card, they found a single phone. Okay, on the phone, they found a single male source DNA that they could not identify.
It wasn't the victim's DNA?
No.
Could they exclude him?
Yeah.
They had found the victim's DNA on it, and I believe that they had found his mother's DNA on it because she was the one that found it in the freezer. They did not find a 0% match to two alleles found on the phone. So two different alleles found on the phone, 0% match to my brother. Then they didn't run it against anyone else.
Is that evidence still is that evidence still available for testing?
As far as I know, but I don't know how much they actually found on the phone.
Because that's potentially exculpatory evidence. You might want to check with the Innocence Project too.
Yeah, you have to lose your first couple rounds of appeals before you qualify for it.
Yeah, see, I just do direct appeals, and what you're talking about is preservation of evidence like that. Oh, this is tough. It's this is why, it's so important we get it right at the trial level. It's so important that the prosecutors play fair and that we have, because we're trying to undo these tied up knots. That's what I do. And this is why it's such an uphill battle, because it gets so solidified. Just gets it becomes so hard to correct these injustices, and the injustices when they're coming at you fast and furious. I don't know.
Yeah. And in this trial, there are so much.
Mr. Anderson's, you have a GoFundMe, right?
Yeah.
We've got a give, send, go.
What is that? Can you post that in the chat or wherever you would post it? You got to put that on the bottom of this video, because I know that you've had there it is. Free Zachariah Anderson. Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. And I forgot since my last stream, there has been $130. This is 4 hours ago, so I can't claim it because I'm only been on for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I can't claim that one. But additional money has come in.
Keep
at least one night. Yeah.
It's expensive. These things are expensive, but I gave you a pretty good tip there, the public defender, didn't I? That was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
What's that one worth? Let the taxpayers of Wisconsin at least fund part of this. And one thing it will do is getting the public defender's office will also get your record completely created, so that the private counsel doesn't have to pay for that. So when you get an appeal, the first step in the appeal is to transcribe all the testimony and record below in the trial, and if you've got a 3-week trial, that's a voluminous record, and just that action alone is going to save thousands of dollars. So
I don't think the trial lasted 3 weeks, but there were a lot of sidebars. There were a lot of send jury out of the room. So if you
that's
count
all part of the trial.
Yeah. So
and then you've also got the record. Was there a lot of motion practice pre-trial?
There were a lot of motions. Because it was so many years of trial. There were a lot of motions that were just automatically denied by the judge. He didn't even look at them. He admitted to it too.
It's different. See, here's another. I'll correct something. This is a common misconception amongst the laity, the non-appellate folks, and the non-legal folks. The filing of a motion is basically a meaningless act.
Yeah.
And I get pro se people do this all the time. They file motion after motion after motion, right? And then the judge ignores it. Well, they do ignore it. The only time a motion gets ruled upon is if the parties request a hearing and an order. So in order for the motion to become real, something that can be appealed, there needs to be an order from the judge. So this is the key. If you have a motion and no order, it's non-appealable because there's no judicial act to be reviewed. Does this make sense? So if you can file 20 motions. The ones that matter are the ones that you hold a hearing on. Sometimes you file motions just to preserve an issue. Like there are certain motions that you must file. I could pull out my file statutes and name them, but basically you have to file certain motions at arraignment. So there's a block of, you'll see private attorneys appear and they file a block of motions and they never hear them. But if you don't file them up front, then they get waived. So they file them immediately so that they're not waived, but they're never called up. They're never ruled on because they're not an issue in a trial, as opposed to an issue of, say, suppression, which, and then you have a hearing and there's an order by a court, and then the order is reviewable whether the court got it right or wrong. So the fact that a motion was filed and not ruled upon, that is not appealable. If you've got a motion and it was ruled upon, that is something subject to appellate review.
Sorry.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I'll say that it happens also at trial. And this is this is not your case. I was just talking about it today with my appellate attorney that I'm training, and I was telling her about this because I had a case where I tried it. We went to jury trial, and I got 2 felonies down to 1 misdemeanor. I took that misdemeanor to the U.S. Supreme Court. they never granted my cert. Eventually, I'm going to get that issue heard. But during that process, there was an evidentiary issue, and I brought it to the court's attention. And he's just like, the judge is like, okay. Anything else, counselor? Right? And I'm like, yes, I want a ruling on this issue. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he wouldn't give me a ruling. So I had to enunciate to the court, well, I'm assuming you're denying my motion because you're not responding to my question, right? And judges hate that because they don't want to rule. So some judges don't rule so that they don't have an appellate issue. And then the defense attorneys don't want to be aggressive about it, and they don't get them to rule. So, it even occurs in an oral type situation at the trial. The court must rule because the appellate court is reviewing errors of law made by the judge, generally.
That actually makes a lot more sense why Schrader would make a statement about how he wasn't prepared to make a decision and then would just not say anything about it. Like specifically about gravely mouthing along with the testimony, where Schrader leaned forward and he held the flash drive up and he said, "I'm keeping this," right? Which was direct evidence of gravely mouthing simultaneously with with Marquand Washington on the stand, and then that was on a Friday, and then just completely pretended like it never happened after that.
Yeah, see, that's a judge technique to avoid making a ruling so that it's not subject to a appellate review. And there's exceptions to that, but I will just say that I've seen that a lot. It's judges don't want to be reversed and they don't want to rule. I don't know. It's not good judging. It just occurs. Your defense team needs to force the issue. And see, the thing is people think I'm all Mr. Nice. This is the thing. See, I want to correct this. They think, oh, Gosney's such a nice guy. I'm adorable and dorky, but I'm not necessarily nice. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons they hate me is because I force rulings, and that's not the way to be popular. The popular defense attorney, it's like, okay, I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it go, Mr. Prosecutor. But, boy, I call the judges on it. I'm like, Judge, I remember this one judge who shall remain unnamed, named Judge Wolf. And I had a case with him, and I had this great motion on that painful case that I was telling you about. It was like a very complex motion involving prosecutorial misconduct and sanctions on a prosecutor who didn't reveal changed testimony, didn't reveal stuff, and it was a motion for sanctions, a motion for this. It was a very tough motion, and the whole time the judge is looking off like this, just ignoring me. He's a very pro-state, anti-defense, nasty judge, and I'm making this argument, and he's just looking off, completely ignoring me. And then during the motion, I said, well, I think it was a corpus delicti issue, actually, come to think of it, that there was not the corpus of the crime. And I said, well, there is no evidence that can show this element. And I said, there was no evidence presented in the state's case that shows this element. And I said, okay, was there? Because I didn't hear it. Judge, would you inform me if there's any evidence? Can I address it? Please tell me. And he's just ignoring me like this. And so I just sat there and let silence go. And he was playing, because if he talks and it's on the record, right? And silence isn't revealed during the pendency of the record because it's recorded, right? So it's like he asks the question and then moves on. There's no 90-second gap. So I just sat there and let the question hang out there. If there's any evidence to this element, I want to hear about it. And I just said, everybody was quiet in the courtroom for 90 seconds. And then at the end of that, I said, so, Judge, after 90 seconds has passed, not having heard any response from the bench, I will assume that there is no such evidence to this element. and he was like, you'll assume no such thing, counselor, right? He got all in. Then he starts talking, right? So I have a way of charming the judges. But I'm just giving you an example of making a judge rule, because see, that's what they do, is they play these games. I'm sorry. Yeah. This is Gosney stories. I'm here. I'm talking too much. What else do you got for me?
Well, the stream weak DNA evidence versus strong DNA evidence, and watching the two trials presenting DNA evidence, which one, in your opinion, Steve, is the strong DNA evidence versus weak DNA evidence?
Well, see, this is the thing. The first stream, I was kind of wondering why you were showing me that, because that's done by the book. That prosecutor was just, that was the way it should be done. That's what you should see when DNA evidence is presented, exactly like that first DNA evidence expert. What was done here, it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I was, that it kind of struck me. I've never seen it done quite that way. Now, I would imagine there would be circumstances when you could do that, but the reason you would do that was because it didn't matter. But here, this is like their entire case, right? I mean, that's a big evidence. If the victim's blood is in that van, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And the way they presented that was very like,
that's the
it just kinda
only
came out of
piece of,
nowhere.
that's the only piece of evidence linking Zach to Junior. Physical
Yeah, well,
evidence.
that's a big deal. And so it was not properly predicated. Check out the National District Attorney Association predicate questions manual. There's a National District Association handbook on predicate questions. It lists it. Like I said, when that first one, I'm like, this is just the predicate questions. I've seen it a million times. You know, when we get this appeal, you can just run through that. You see them. It's like, okay, that question, bing, 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 bing. This guy didn't do any of that. Now, see, this is what I'm saying. It's not really necessary because you don't need the guy's qualification, all that, but it's proper. And so when you're not following the standard, my question is, why are you not standing the standard? Why would you not do that on the critical evidence of the case? Really, if that's true. Maybe because some predicates couldn't be met. I don't know. I'm very, or maybe he's just an arrogant elected official and doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just, I'm going to show him how it's done. I'm going to get guilt because I'm an advocate for guilt, because put the guilty away and to hell with the law. I'm just going to use my ego to bash my way through guilt.
Solomon can correct me if he wants to, but as I remember it, since they don't have a body, they have to assume a lot of things with the blood evidence and everything. And since Junior's father is missing, they could not check DNA against father, only against mother. Also, a niece is missing, so they can't show. So there only was mother and kids. So you only have this partial puzzle that they can go through.
I'm not sure if that's really dispositive one way or another. I'm not sure if that makes a difference. I'm not that much of a DNA expert to know whether or not not having.
But they had that issue when they tried to get his Guterres DNA profile into the missing persons register, because the witness there claimed they didn't have a full DNA profile.
I know, but I don't know if it's necessary to have that many family members. I just don't know that. That's an expert witness question on DNA as to what you can establish without the presence of other. I don't know. That's a very technical question. Yeah,
but when it comes to the Zachariah Anderson case, we have a lot of issues with the denial of getting this out of this court and move it to a neighboring court. That was denied. I saw it in the chat. Wasn't Judge Schroeder
for the removal? Well, you said that the victim here was connected to a lot of the people there.
Also, the victim's mother works as a court clerk, or have worked as a court clerk in a neighboring, if I don't remember,
in Milwaukee.
But in Milwaukee. So you have
I will say, here's another issue I've dealt with. I have not read an article on it, but I have dealt with this issue a lot, and that's change of venue motions. And in all honesty, I do not understand to this day why courts are so reluctant to change jurisdictions. We had an extremely high profile case that I've been involved in very recently that I can't talk about involving this very issue. And we were, having this discussion, like, why are the courts so reluctant to grant these change of venue motions?
Yeah.
To me, the more reluctant they are, the more it means that it should be transferred, because it means they care about the outcome of the case. And I don't understand, like, does it really affect the case?
If the evidence should speak for itself, so it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, I
Who
mean, if the
prosecutes.
defendant feels he's not getting a fair trial in the jurisdiction, transfer it, right? I mean, it's like, I remember, what was it? I'm trying to think about a disqualification. I don't know. I mean, I just, if you're fighting it, well, we have, like, for instance, judicial disqualification. Let's use that as an example. Judicial disqualification should be automatic. You know, there's a rule in your first judicial disqualification. If you state a reason for, well, I know a good one I was just looking at was that Nicholas Cruz case, and that the female judge who was hugging the family of the victims and was hugging the prosecutor and being very friendly with the prosecution team during the Cruz case, right, was recently disqualified by another capital defendant based on his distrust of the judge, because she was expressing such sympathy and goodwill towards the prosecution team that, and so what the defense did was move to disqualify that judge, and she denied it, and then the Florida Supreme Court overruled it and removed her and put a different judge in. Now, my question to the judge is, why do you care so much? Like, if somebody, we were talking about, when I'm a public defender and a private counsel comes in, you know, I don't want to work on a case and then have the private, but really it doesn't matter. I'm doing the work anyway. I'd rather them come in and take it off immediately so I don't have to deal with it. But, you know, like, I get clients and they say, you know, I want to fire you Gosney. And I'm like, great. Like, I want your case. You know, I mean, like, private counsel comes in, I'm like, hire private counsel. That's great. You know, like, I don't have any interest in the case. I'm going to do my job in the cases that come before me. But if somebody wants to hire private counsel, like, they want to kick me off the case, sure. Why? I don't have any investment in that. Same thing with a judge. If they want the judge off, what's the big deal? And then, of course, change a venue. Why do they care that it's in this little jurisdiction? If the defense feels that they're getting an unfair shake in this jurisdiction, why not just transfer it? But it's very common. It's very hard to get a change of venue.
Yeah. And in this case, Judge Schroeder, after Rittenhouse trial, he stepped down from the bigger cases and only did the smaller cases in a wait for his actual retirement. So they have to bring him back up to this. And then you had the accident, which caused a supposed head injury. So they had to postpone the trial until he was well enough to be the judge on the case.
Yeah, MG Law in the chat here. He's got a channel, I think. Somebody said that he had a channel. He does it, and he says we talked about that one. So he must have covered that. The Cruz judge was rightfully removed that case. Yes, he was absolutely rightfully judged. And I saw that people were asking me about my opinion on that case. Sorry to get away from it, but I was like, she's setting herself up for disqualification because of what she did in that case. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going too late. I got to get to work tomorrow, but I'm going to have to tap out here.
No, it's so I have to admit, I kind of, this stream, weak versus strong, and you might have identified it already, that why did you show me the first? Well, it was to show you the second.
Okay, well, that was a good setup. You caught me flat-footed, and it was perfect. It was really well done, because that does show you. The first one was how it should be done. That's typical DNA presentation. The second one was unusual, and when, you know, this is part of, like, see, my certification is in criminal trial work. I'm really I'm really a trial guy, right? But I've been doing appeals for now 12 years. But the thing about having the trial background is that when you hear something that's not right, it hurts your ear. It's like, wait, what was that? What was that? Like, you know, and I kind of did that on the first one, but then she cleaned it up. And I'm like, I just have questions, right? But it was most of it was standard. I'm like, okay, yes, I've heard it a million times, right? But when this other guy, Eglin, came out of nowhere, I'm like, what's going on? And that's the thing. If your ear is tuned to when you've done enough trials, like, see, Mr. Anderson Solomon, it's probably your first trial you've ever had to deal with, right?
Yeah, I haven't sat through, 70 trials or whatever. So
yeah. So when you sit through enough of these trials, it's like jury instructions. I mean, I must have read through hundreds and hundreds of jury instructions. So when when you're hearing it, or plea colloquies, I mean, thousands of plea colloquies. And so when the plea colloquy is wrong, you're like, wait a second, what's that? Right. Because you've heard it so many times. It's like boring, boring, boring. Gosney, you're not paying attention. But then it's like, because your ear's paying attention, is like, that's wrong. You know what it is, Nick. You were talking about that earlier before Solomon got on.
Yeah. And in my case, it's the amount of negotiations I've been involved in. And once you have your first 100, and I say this because more than 1,500 over 30 years negotiations from small to big. You tune out from the standard stuff, but you as I call it, my bullshit meter spikes when I hear something odd.
Something's wrong there. Hey, MG Law is still in the chat. He says he went over the cruise judge removal on your channel. We went over on your channel in the same stream we talked about the Glossop case. Oh, okay. Yeah, I did talk about that. Okay, so he's MG Law. I feel like I'm missing something here. I don't know. I'm missing something, but yes, I've talked about this before. Glossop is a wrongful conviction out of Oklahoma, and it's guys on the death row. He almost got death 3 times. He had 3 last meals. And there's all kinds of prosecutorial misconduct, and it's in the AG's. In fact, you know what it is? It's the stream that I say in praise of a great prosecutor. How's that? See Gosney here? See, I'm such a critic of the prosecutor. No, I have a whole stream saying what a great prosecutor this was, because the prosecutor supported the defense motion to overturn the case. And then I just found out today. So he joined the defense motion to reopen to look at this case because of all the misconduct in it, and the Oklahoma Appellate Court, despite both parties agreeing, still turned him down. He's still on death row.
I have some starred comments here. First, thank you, MLS, for $20.
Oh yes, thank you,
Thank you, Juni B. Jones.
Has a stream, a live stream. I'm pretty sure he was talking, and so check him out.
Yeah,
post it in the chat if what your channel is. Let people look.
Yeah, me and David Helm on MLS Law Show, we do a lot of cooperation, so they will see us together once in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you have this question from.
Does that
a while ago?
No, they can come and go. A lot of times your second chair, that's why you have a second chair, because you need them to organize witnesses or coordinate things or go in and out, do research. Yeah. So a second chair is very helpful in a lot of ways. We fight for second chairs in the public defender's office because it's good trial experience. Yeah. And usually you get the more experienced attorneys lead. And then, or like when I second chair, I'm doing it usually for appellate preservation purposes. So I come into second chair to preserve a particular issue in the case that may be of my concern. Maybe I wrote an article on it, and they're like, bring it. And I've actually been brought in to discipline a prosecutor on closing arguments, and I was brought in specifically to object to improper closing arguments on a prosecutor who was likely to do that. So, so second chairs, you can kind of very flexible and very helpful to a prosecutor.
I believe that question came when we talked about a person specializing in DNA.
Right. Yeah. Well, they don't have to stay there. Another one that was a big DNA second chair was the Zimmerman case. If you remember the Zimmerman case, there was 2 attorneys. Don West was the second chair, and he was brought in because he was a technical specialist. So the lead was O'Mara. That was one of the best defense conducted trials I've ever seen. Great, out of Florida here. In fact, I thought I was going to get that case, but he got a not guilty, appeal. And O'Mara took the case, and he was very telegenic and very good with the jury. But he brought in Don West because Don West is a specialist and an expert on some of these technical issues that are involved. So Don would second share and came in on his part. So you
Yeah.
divide it up like that, and I don't know where my K-bar is.
Yeah, and then I have these, which are from Solomon, crime lag process of testing DNA. I had from my birthday stream the other day. You went on about New York, how they test the lab process of testing DNA.
So there was there's a company called Cybergenetics, and someone by the name of Mark Perlin, who's one of the CEOs and founders, that run a different processing algorithm to cross-reference a larger population of DNA. Right. So instead of the person in the lab actually setting the boundaries on the number, the size of the pool that they're testing the DNA against, the TrueAllele program tests against all potential possibilities, and you can actually cross-reference a much larger number of DNA profiles out of a specific specimen. Well, the TrueAllele program retested 85 DNA cases in the state of New York, and 70% of those came back incorrect.
Wow. Yeah, crime lab is state crime labs tough. I mean, I don't know. This is just these are big problems. There's so many problems, and that's why the burden of proof needs to be on the state. Skepticism, ethical thing, the whole process, it needs to be maintained and nourished from all these sides. Instead, it's being undermined from all sides, and what it leads to is injustice.
Yeah. And then I have, thank you, Rayman. 1 in population of the Earth square works for me. That's the. And then I had, don't forget the unmatched DNA on the razor and phone. Yeah, it was on the razor as well.
There was a straight blade razor that was pulled into evidence that they had shown in the discovery, or in the evidence that was collected on the screen when they were showing a list of things that were submitted to the crime lab, but they never actually tested this straight blade razor for all the possibilities.
Where was the straight blade razor found?
It was found at the crime scene.
I know, but was it in a location where it might have been involved in the crime?
Close enough that the police deemed it worthy of collection, yes.
Because the police didn't collect from the bedroom, even though it was a window semi-open there. They didn't test the light switched, even though the lights were turned off.
Yeah, this is good. I don't. I'd have to see the crime scene photos and understand the crime scene in order to really see whether, because if the razor was in the bathroom, sitting next to the thing where somebody shaves, then that would not be of evidentiary value, probably, right? But if it was laying next to a pool of blood, then it would be of evidentiary value. So, it depends on the location, whether it is. But if they collected it, usually when they collect something, they feel that it does have some evidentiary value. I don't know. I'd have to understand the crime scene better.
Yeah. Next time I will have a stream where I don't have to trick you with a complicated
No, that was
question.
cool. I really appreciate you made your point very well with that little demonstration. And,
but I will. I can probably send you the crime scene photos I have.
See, the problem is I cannot. One of the reasons I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson. You seem like a very nice man, and your family. I talked to your sister; she seems sweet. You had a beautiful baby, and there, the world. I have to focus on the things that are in front of me in the cases, and I very much limit what I do and what attention I put on things. And I can't really help you. I'm not a appellate lawyer in Wisconsin.
It's okay.
So it's I can give you some guidance. I'm giving you some tips the best that I can, but it would be, I could lose my license for, practicing law outside my jurisdiction. So I'm very much.
You don't have to make excuses to me.
No.
Trust me. I
But I
just tease
also
you for
cannot-
trying to sell your book on every stream that I see you on. Every stream, you're holding it up like a newborn child, like Michael
This
Jackson
book?
hanging his baby off the balcony. And
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing here. But also the fact is I can't take Florida cases. The only way that I take the case is if they're an indigent client and they come to me, they're assigned to me by my office, right?
Mm.
And so I have people in Florida asking me for stuff, and I'm very limited in what I can tell people. So, I just it hurts me. I see good people like yourself, and there's such needs out there for competent counsel, and there are competent counsel out there. But like finding them, these are all very difficult things. So, I hope you take it.
Yeah, but in another stream, I might have it lined up so I can show it to you, including the very interesting crime scene drawing. And yeah,
It sounds to me like this case has got a lot, and
Yeah.
and that's good in a way, in that there may be a whole mine of good appellate issues. So just get the best counsel you get, and do the best for your brother, and pray, and be the family, because you're going to have lawyers involved, and they're the ones that are going to have to write the brief. They're the ones that are going to have to go through it, but they don't ultimately have the thing that you have, that you're the only people that can fill that role. So you're outside fighting, and that's great. He's blessed to have you.
Yeah, and I know it's past 12 at your place now.
Yeah, I need to get to bed. I've got
and
so much going on.
and I have no more stars that involves questions for you. So do a grift.
All right. No, I'm not going to grift. You know what my grift is? Go to go to the Anderson website and free Zachariah Anderson, because that he's got family that, if for nothing else, he's got family that loves him and cares a lot, and they need help, because whether or not you think he did it or didn't, he needs good appellate review to make sure that this process was respected. Because if this is representative, and every time I've seen this guy, I can't stand him, there needs to be some vigorous appellate review in this case. And this is a case that you can make a difference in by donating. So do look up the free Zachariah Anderson Give Send Go page, and that'll be my grift for tonight. How's that? And I'm gonna have to go to bed, because I got to get up early tomorrow. I've got an 8 o'clock. So. And I need my beauty sleep. I don't think well when I'm tired either. All right. God bless you, man. And God bless you, Mr. Anderson. Give my best to your family. Your sister was very nice when I was on with her.
Thank you very much. I will.
Thank you for showing up, Steve. Yeah. Yeah. Another live stream, another Zachariah Anderson. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Nicholas.
But as I've said numerous times before, I can't let this go. I can't let this case go. Not only because all of the issues with it. As an outsider, I'm Swedish. I'm not in any way an expert in the U.S. legal system, but I do know how to evaluate evidence. And this case reeks of misconduct, how misinterpreting the evidence, misstating the evidence. And and also, as I've said previously, I grew up in Swedish redneck country, 40 minutes from a town with 100,000 inhabitants. So I understand this. There are so many similarities between the way I grew up, people I knew, and the Anderson family. And so I will keep doing this. I do know that Legal Vices, Jeff, is planning on a stream around the time of the sentencing, where I will force him to do it as what's the name again? sun's already up here.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So, well, so he can promote the Gives and Go.
Yeah, Jeff told me that he was gonna at sentencing or shortly after sentencing, he was gonna do a little fundraiser live stream.
Yeah.
So he and I talked about that at Legal Vices. For those of you that don't have him sub, go throw him a little bit of love. I know that the YouTube algorithm has been unkind to him, automatically unsubscribing quite a few people that were fans of his. So just make sure that you double check that you're subscribed to him, because he's a good guy. A good guy that really believed, just like Nicholas, in the critical evaluation of evidence, and was not sold on the bill of goods that Michael Gravely tried to sell.
Yeah, and I remember Jeff said he doesn't really care if Zach did it or not. It's all about, did the prosecution prove it? And
Right.
in his opinion, as I remember it, they were nowhere near proving anything.
Yeah, and what's scary is the idea that the case becomes precedential, because the judge trying to make sure it went to the jury, the judge refusing to make decisions on the bench, the judge refusing to allow evidence in, all of these things that happen on top of the prosecutorial misconduct. At what point is the misconduct in the case so egregious that it, they're going to be able to make an argument in the appellate court that it's either too complicated, too convoluted, or that there were no decisions to argue because the judge refused to argue them. And the fact of the matter is that the judge insisted that the defense agreed to move forward with the case after they objected to the whole gun scenario, which is again trying to weasel it in to let it go through so the appellate court would have some sort of logic to not overturn the verdict. I don't think that Judge Schrader was doing this as a neutral party. He was trying to get this case to establish a new classification or a new interpretation of the hearsay law, and get the feather in his hat for a bodiless homicide.
Yeah, but let's go through these last. Thank you, Eliza, for $10 for the super sticker. Much appreciated. It's me, Josie. Another amazing stream. Thanks, Nick. Love hearing Steve talk law, and always enjoy when Solomon is on a stream. Free Zachariah Anderson. And Ashley Elrod, $10. Thank you so much. I much appreciate it. And Gigi, my moderator today, her mom would have been 75. Would have been, well, I'm sorry for your loss. I hope you had enough time with her to appreciate the wisdom she passed down to you. Happy birthday, Mom, Gigi's mom. And let's see here if we might have let's see here. Well, that will be up in the next stream if there is more on the. I accidentally closed most of it down. Thank you for showing up, Solomon. Good to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me last minute. I know that this was something between you and Steve, and I appreciated what you were laying down. I was just yelling at Steve from the chat.
Yeah, and good to have you on. So I didn't, so you could correct my mistake with the phone and the credit card. I got those two switched around, but the important stuff there was, in my opinion, that's exculpatory evidence. someone else was there in direct connection to the crime.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I keep hammering, is that they found somebody, but they didn't identify who that person was. Even after the fact, when they got the evidence back, when the lab had finally ran the DNA, and they still only focused on my brother, and that's a tragedy that the police, that the DA, that nobody looked at it and said, wait, pump the brakes, we need to reevaluate this. I think we've been approaching this from the wrong angle. Nobody did the right thing, not a single person, and that's a tragedy.
Yeah, and I remember on the Facebook group that David posted something about the date who drove to the wrong place, how about her testimony, how it might connect to the actual found beer and water bottle in the apartment. That there is actually maybe not a strong, but there is a possibility that these 40 minutes that are missing from her timeline, she might actually have been in the apartment at that time.
Yeah, very possible. I made the argument like Steve had earlier several times over that this seemed way more about money. This whole crime, the fact that he was robbed, that they had taken the phone and the credit cards, throw them in the freezer. To me, that meant that they hit him, didn't intend for him to die, took the phone, threw it in the freezer, and then left him to then discover the body later when they went back.
That speculatively, you now have 12 hours to come up with the rest of the money, and then they went back 13 hours later, and oh crap. Yeah,
right. I mean, pure speculation, but to
Pure
me,
speculation.
it looked like he knew the person, that he invited them in, that he was bludgeoned with his own bat, right? I think that there's a logical connection there. He bought a bunch of baseball supplies. There was no bat to be found in the house. Thirdly, he opened a second drink for somebody that was in there with him. Fourth, the missing money. Fifth, the phone in the freezer, which would be to prevent him from dialing 911 so they could get away fast enough, right? And then the argument on the 18th, which was testified to by an anonymous tip, that they saw a woman standing on the patio. So you had neighbors that said that they heard an argument on the 18th, and then a woman on the patio. So you have all of these other situations that actually add up to a logical course of events that make a lot of sense. That one, he knew the person; two, that he owed them money; and three, that maybe they didn't intend to kill him, but he died anyway. And maybe he's not dead. I don't know, because they never produced a body. But the reality is that there seems to be a major disconnect with what was presented, with my brother apparently blitzing and whipping out a bunch of weapons, and then speed lifting and wrapping a flawless execution, and moving the body to then dispose of it in between going to work and getting his taxes filed. And none of that makes sense. It just doesn't.
Yeah, and then driving around with supposedly driving around with a dead body in his trunk for almost a full day.
Yep.
And all that's left is that little speck.
Right.
A blood-drenched rug, leaving only that little speck.
Yep. And no traffic cameras that ever saw him. A phantom car ride through all of the Milwaukee interchanges. There's no part of this that makes sense.
Yeah. 3.5 hours. Sun is up. You need to get to sleep as well, because I know. Oh. I know you need your sleep.
Yeah.
Newborn.
All right, my friend. I need to go though, because I actually do have to do my homework. But thank you again from the bottoms of our hearts, Nicholas. We truly, very deeply and humbly appreciate your help and your support. The focus that you've kept on this, the content that you've made, on behalf of our movement, on behalf of my brother, and just know that we do appreciate what you're doing for us. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to send you off, and thank you to the chat for being here with good questions, and thank you for the memberships. Thank you for the super chats. And what I have planned on, well, I have a lot of updates on cases I have previously covered, like the Andrew Tate case, some crap with what's her face? Well, whatever. There's content coming up. Yeah,
right?
Letitia Stout. Yeah, that's Letitia Stout, a trial that involves Alaskan vampires. Tupac might be alive. Rise people from the dead and multiple personality disorder. That's interesting.
That's a wild ride.
That's a wild ride. But thank you so much for being on, Solomon. We will probably see each other again.
Sounds good. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah. And yeah, let's play the outro so you all can go to bed. Okay.